おはようございます。本日は、今日は香港で、午後は、Chinese in Africa ですね。で、最初にですね、香港の日本のサマリがあるんで、それをちょっと見ていきたいと思いますけど、香港って1997年にイギリスから返還されたんですよね、中国にね。で、それが、最近去年ですか、行政長官の選挙やってね。で、これは選挙管理委員会が、候補者を選ぶっていうことで、まあ、かなり、その中国寄りの人材しか立候補できなくなっちゃったっていうね。香港人って700万人いてですね。まあ、選挙するんですけど、実際には今言った候補者を選ぶっていうのは1200人の選挙委員会ってあって、まあ実際には、間接選挙なんですね。で、そのためにアンブレラリボリューションっていうのが起こったんですよね。で、一国二制度とは言っても、まあだんだん中国が、行政長官の選挙もそうですけど、圧力をかけてきてるんですね。で、経済面ではっていうか、もう全く、これ台湾もそうですけど、中国がもう、独占してるっていうか、まあ、香港は昔はね、ファイナンシャルセンターでしたけど、今は実際にはもう、上海に移ってるし、それから香港の隣の深センですね、にもう経済の中心がもう移っているっていうのは実態ですね。でそうは言ってもやっぱり香港はゲートウェイなんでね、いろんな情報とか、政治経済外交のですね、そういう位置づけはあるんですね。あと中国から来る、本土から来るね、人たち、まあ、制限して受け入れてるんですけども、そういう人たちにもやっぱり圧力があるんですね。特に観光客なんかは、香港の人と違って、中国の人ってのは、まあなんていうかな、行儀悪いというかね、道路で子供の、糞尿したりですね、平気でやるんで、そういうふうなことをどう管理するのかってね。うん。あとはまあ、香港法執行機関っていうのは、香港の法律が適用されるというか、実際にはですね、ここに書いてありますように、香港のね、書店の関係者が、これ悪口を書いたんですよね。で、工作員に拉致されて、まあ、中国本土に連れて行かれたんでしょうね。ちょっとどうなってるかわかんないんですけどね。中国の人たちの私生活書いたんですよね。で、あとはもう一つは昨年1月にですね、金持ちの、小って中国なんていうのかな、小天法っていうのかな、っていう人がですね、中国に、香港から拉致された。これも違法っていうか、契約違反なんですけど、こういうことやってですね。だから、民主主義の大前提である、まあ、人権の方がなくなったっていうか、まあ、ヒューマンライツですね。これは非常に大きな民主主義の要件ですけど、まあ、それが崩れてきた。まあ、中国そのものは民主主義っていうのは経験してないんでね、何が民主主義かっていうのはよくわかんないところあると思うんですけども、まあ、そういうふうなところありますね。だからここで、私が言ってるの、一国二制度が50年持たないっていうのは、まあ、そろそろ崩れてきてるっていうことですね。まあ、選挙もそうですし、それから、まあ、報道の自由ってもね、好き放題報道しちゃうと、こういうふうに、中国の工作員に連れてかれたりですね、してしまうとかですね、やっぱり、あと人権もこういうふうに保護されてないとか、いうことですね。
前、私、香港にいたときに聞いたんですけど、台湾に移民する人とかが増えてきてるって聞きました。
台湾に？
はい。
もともと香港の人って台湾っていうよりさ、カナダに移民してませんでした？カナダ。
そうなんですか？
うん。
知らないです。
うん。香港の人、カナダのパスポート持ってる人、もちろんブリティッシュから離れた時に英国のパスポートを取った人もいっぱいいるんですよね。 カナダは多いんじゃないですか、香港は。台湾っていうのはちょっとね、とってもね、中国との関係あるから、まあ台湾、まあ中国は力でもって英語することはないと思うんでね。まあ、台湾でもいいと思うんですけど。
台湾とか、他の海外の国。
うん。なぜ今カナダって言ったかっていうとね、彼ら学校行くじゃないですか、海外の。
はい。
そうするとやっぱり、向こうのビザがもらえるんですよね。そういうこともあるんだね。あとは、前はカナダは学校じゃなくて、確かお金でなんか投資すればビザもらえた時があったんですね。それで結構行かなくてもパスポートもらえるっていう、ビザっていう時にね。うん。まあ、あとはだから、50年間の香港政府による自死っていうけども、実際には今先ほど言ったように保障されてないっていうね。まあ、裁判所もちゃんとしてるんですけど、まあ、拉致されちゃったら裁判もやってくれもないですしね。で、報道の自由もやっぱり、ね、好きなこと言うとやっぱりそういうふうな中国に関係に睨まれるとかっていうふうなことがあるんで、そういう意味では、まあ、民主主義国家とは言えなくなっちゃったっていうのは、事実でしょうね。だから、北京がだんだん香港の民主主義を侵害してきているっていうね。で、香港のコアバリューってそもそもオープン性とか透明性とか平等な立場とか、誠実な競争とか法による統治とか、集会の自由、発言の自由。まあ、それが香港のコアバリューだったんですね。それがまあ、侵害されている。で、ただ、難しいんですけど、やっぱり中国そのものをどうやって見るかでしょうね。中国が例えばビジネスをするとか、もしくは生活するとか、住むとかいう意味で、香港と比べて非常に住みにくいっていうか、やりづらい国かっていうと、まあ、必ずしも政府を批判しなければね、そんなことないんですよね。だから、まあ、なんだっけ、僕の、大好きな、なんだっけな、後で出てきますけど、なんとかちゃんつって、おばさんいるけど。
ああ。
なんだっけ、名前忘れ、なんとかちゃんつって忘れちゃったけど。彼女はこういう香港のコアバリューってこういうこと言ってんですよね。だけど実際には、まあ、ベトナムもそうですけどね、中国もそうですけど、民主主義国家じゃないけれども、まあ、決して悪くはないというかね。
大抵、これ、この香港のコアバリューっていうのが、まあ中国色になると、まあ本当にさっきユーノさんが言ってたように、上海で良くなっちゃうますよね。
うん、そうですよ。もうだって、香港のファイナンシャルセンターって機能はやっぱり上海はもう超えちゃってるしね、株式市場だって、深センが今ね、香港よりでかくなってるのかな。だから、しかも香港と上海って株の融通相互ができるようになってるんで、まあ、香港の位置づけを中国はどういうふうにこれしていくのかっていう。もちろんさっきゲートウェイって言いましたけど、中国の便利なところは、香港をそういう意味では自由諸国との、橋渡しとして自由に使えるっていう意味では、うまく利用していこうっていう気持ちあるんですよね。要するに、西欧諸国が、何をするにしても、気兼ねなく投資するしたりね、ビジネスしたりできるという意味でね。まあ、だけど中国にしてみればもうじきね、2020年って言ったけど、2027年ぐらいになると思いますけど、アメリカを超えていっちゃうっていう時期が来るとなると、やっぱり世界一のやっぱり経済国家になると、まあ、報道の自由っていうのはやっぱり自由なんでしょうな。要するに彼らの体制が全く不安がないっていうかね、新疆地区とか、あと、例の、なんだっけ、もう一つ問題あったでしょ。ラマ教とか、なんかいろいろあるじゃないですか。ああいうのも、 国家がそれによってぐらつくようなことはなくなれば、まあ中国はあまり心配しないっていうか、好き勝手にやっていいよっていうになるんでしょうね。だからそうは言っても、まあ、こういうふうなことをね、やっぱり、今現在では、いろいろ騒いでる。アンブレラリボリューションみたいなこと言ってるけどね。で、マカオはですね、香港ほど要するに騒いだりしないんですね。で、ここはまあ、ギャンブルの都市ですから、GDP が日本の倍あるんですね。ちょうど2倍ですね。で、知らなかったですけど、ベーシックインカムが年に1200ドル支給されて、非常に、だから北朝鮮なんか、拠点としていいですよね、彼。マカオ使ってますからね。キャッシュデリバリーに。これ、今年の台風ってこれ、今年っていうと、2016年かな。中国の軍隊に支援を置いたってね。で、だから、マカオ自身も、まあ、中国領土で、二国制度ですけど、まあ、あんまり過敏な動きは、マカオはしてない、ね。そういう意味で。あんまりベーシックインカムが年に1200ドルあるってやっぱり知られてませんけど、そういう意味では、フィンランドと一緒ですよね。豊か。Okay, let's try to have a look about Hong Kong in English. Democratic development in Hong Kong has been a major topic since the transfer of sovereignty to China in 1997. The one country, two systems principle allows the Hong Kong government to administer all area of government except foreign relations and military defense separately from the national Chinese government. Many Hong Kong citizens became concerned about democratic development when the first chief executive of Hong Kong, Tan Chi-hua, appeared to have mishandled this issue. Other democracy-related issues involving human rights and universal suffrage became the new focal point for the pro-democracy camp. Ever since the 1950s, the Chinese government has continually threatened the British in attempting to bring any democratic development in Hong Kong. Attempt to bring Hong Kong citizens onto the negotiating table by the British during the Sino-Anglo discussions were rejected by Beijing in the late 1980s. A deadlock between the two countries has exacerbated to the point where mutual fabrication of ideals culminated to lack of political progress. The last governor, Chris Patten, faced a great deal of opposition in changing the former colony's political system. Since the election of C.Y. Leung as chief executive in 2012, the democratic development have come to a halt. The umbrella revolution, which was triggered by students, disaffected with the continued stalling of Beijing, and in particular the pronouncement of NPCSC of 31st August 2014 that Hong Kong must accept a version of universal suffrage for the chief executive in 2017, where up to 3 candidates are pre-approved by the election committee. an electoral college widely seen to be loyal to Beijing authorities. Just I told you, this is a college member, 1,200 people, right? Okay. Next, moving to the video. After the rain, what is happening to Hong Kong democracy? I'm going to show you video and just explanation like this. 2 decades after the UK handed it back to China, President Xi Jinping is in Hong Kong for the first time to celebrate the anniversary. This is just a moment, this is something. Just a moment. Yeah. The one country to see, oh, they put here something. The one country, two systems principle was designed to preserve democratic freedoms in the wealthy former colony. After troubled years of protest at the perceived erosion of those rights, the Guardian meets young Hong Kong citizens struggling to afford property. These moving abroad for opportunities, leaders of the pro-democracy umbrella movement and movers in the pro-Beijing establishment. で、その下にまとめが書いて2047年までね、資本主義が維持される。アンソン・チャン。で、彼女が民主を理解した初代の政務官だったんですね。で、だからやっぱり彼女がそういう政務官やったんで非常に民主主義に対して詳しい。で、中国の干渉が激しくなる。句が違う。なって選挙でも中国寄りの人たちが中枢にいるようになっていったと。昨年5人の書店者が失踪した。さっき述べたよね。40% の香港の若者は、香港を離れたがっていると。香港の返還100周年記念で、習近平が来たがデモは阻止されたっていう。アンソン・チャンはなぜイギリス約束を守らないのかと疑問を呈した。まあ、イギリスが守らないっていうか、これどういうことかというと、まあ、先週もそうですけど、テレサ・メイがね、中国を訪問したりして。まあ、経済関係、非常に原子力も含めてね、親密なんで、イギリスとしては中国を非難できない。日本以上にセンシティブですね。これ、次の単語ですけど、これね、違うな、これ。なんか抜けてんだよ、なんだろう。ああ、これ逆だよ、これ。トライアンファントね。エンシュライン。これよく出てくるんですよね、エンシュラインってね。好きだね。これ神社を祭りって意味ですけどね。heal, deteriorate.
さん。最初のやつ。
うん。
トライアンファント。
うん。
M。N じゃなくて M。
あ、トライアンファント。M か、これ。
M。
あ、そうだね。トライアンファント。そう。M と M よく間違えるんだよね。シグナトリー。Heyday. Stand still. Self-determination. Subdivided. Plain. OK. これ短いやつだね。きっと。5分くらいかな。
フリーランスになっても、俺は一人じゃない。では、
9分32分。
Britain finally returned the colony to China on July the 1st, 1997.
The triumphant success of Hong Kong demands and deserves to be maintained.
The Sino-British Joint Declaration, signed a decade earlier, stated that Hong Kong's capitalist system would remain unchanged for 50 years until 2047.
Oh, they are still doing shopping. Queens, so young.
Of one country, two systems enshrined greater democratic freedoms than in communist China. Anson Chan was chief secretary.
Oh, Anson Chan. Oh, she's also very young.
Watching the hoisting of the national flag and with the promises in the Joint Declaration and the Basic Law.
Oh, this is her voice.
This was an opportunity for the country to come together, for the people to be healed. So to me, it's a very, very real disappointment to see how far things have deteriorated. And we're particularly disappointed that neither signatory to the Joint Declaration, that is China and Britain, have honored their promises to the people of Hong Kong.
At the Hong Kong Jockey Club, a lasting symbol of the heyday of British Empire, Wednesday night races regularly see a turnover of over £100 million. An increasing number of gamblers from mainland China have given a huge tax boost to Hong Kong. But growing Chinese influence hasn't been welcomed by everyone. In 2014, a wave of pro-democratic civil disobedience, known as the Umbrella Revolution, brought the city to a standstill.
We were just students and wanted to have a civil disobedience. I think the public share the same anger and share the same eagerness for true democracy, so that the situation exploded.
After 79 days, the protesters were cleared.
Oh, 79 days! Oh my
Since
God!
popular protest had failed, Nathan Law, Joshua Wong, and other protest leaders formed Demo System, a new party advocating self-determination for Hong Kong. Now Nathan Law is an insider, a member of the Legislative Council, Hong Kong's parliament, having won a seat in local elections last October. But Hong Kong's Beijing-backed government is now seeking to disqualify a group of pro-democracy legislators, including Nathan Law, from office.
The government has been trying to unseat me with this court case, and it shows a very serious screening of a political view in Hong Kong.
The disappearance in 2015 of 5 booksellers, including one British national, allegedly abducted from inside Hong Kong into mainland China, appeared to violate the one country, two systems principle. Also new to the legislature is Holden Chow, vice chairman of Hong Kong's biggest pro-Beijing party.
I consider myself as a Chinese, as a patriot. I think the government has to do something to educate the youngsters that we have a Chinese identity. The whole world has experienced a lot of economic downturn, and we're aware that if you look at the economic figure, or if you look at generally speaking our economy, we are safe. I think that is a contribution by the central government.
A 19-mile bridge is due to open later this year. It will link Hong Kong to the dynamic economic area of southeastern China. But for many of the younger generation, the argument that integration brings prosperity rings hollow. Income inequality in Hong Kong is at its highest in 4 decades. Sky-high property prices, exacerbated by inward investment from mainland Chinese buyers, are fueling resentment and a sense of hopelessness. Jay Yan lives in a tiny space in a subdivided flat. Including bills, it costs her almost half her monthly salary.
My flat is less than 100 square foot. It's quite a small space, but the reason I choose to live here is because this is the only flat that I can afford.
Mong Kok district, where she lives, is officially the most dense...
I think Chinese government operating real estate cost in Hong Kong. So they try to control price of everything, and they try to manage Hong Kong economy, influencing politics.
Populated
That's the reason very expensive real estate there.
place on earth.
This price is about $2 million US, and I have to save money for like 300 years to get this flat.
Jay took part in the umbrella movement 2 years ago and usually marches in the political rallies that take place on the July 1st handover anniversary. But this year is different.
The coming 1st of July, I'm not interested. I'm not excited because I know that the government won't listen.
A 2016 survey by an independent think tank found that over 40% of young Hong Kongers want to.
Okay, so government never listen to their opinion, young people, and the real estate and renting costs are so expensive, and Chinese government to open the gate to Shenzhen or wider Hong Kong, sort of things. I think they are thinking about sort of things, not only, okay, you don't need to stay in Hong Kong, but you can commuting from Shenzhen or wider Hong Kong, so you can rent a house or rent a condominium more cheaper rather than central of area of Hong Kong. This is my feeling like that.
To leave. Sam Long and his family are preparing to move to Vancouver.
It's all gone. All furniture is gone.
Between early 2015 and 2016, the number of emigres to Canada doubled.
Hong Kong has changed. There's no turning back. So I have to think about my future.
Okay, intentionally they don't talking about, what I said, like moving to Chinese territory. Instead they are talking about immigration. Because those people is preparing this sort of video, they try to speak out more negative to Chinese movement. But actually many Hong Kongese try to move into China, working at Hong Kong, but living in China. Sort of things will going to be happening. More people, they are moving outside suburbs of Hong Kong. It means Chinese territory.
Mostly it's my
they never say it.
Lung has a final dim sum lunch with his parents. His father, William, was among hundreds of thousands of Chinese who fled the political turmoil and hardship of the 60s and 70s for a better life in Hong Kong. In February, his daughter also left home for Australia.
因为我是1974年从大陆偷渡过来的，我们在这里建立了3代人，我们应该觉得很满足、很幸福。但是在这一年里面，2月份我女儿又跟女士、外孙2个移民了到了澳大利亚，现在又轮到他们了，所以这里是有点心里有点难过。
My friends, some of my friends, they didn't know I was leaving, so they emailed me or WhatsApp me, and they all of them is not asking why, it's asking how.
As Chinese President Xi Jinping arrives in Hong Kong amidst tightened security, official celebrations are already underway.
我相信，通过在港的一系列活动，一定会增强我们发展香港、建设香港的信心。
Zhang Yotong is one of the chief celebration organizers, welcoming delegates from the mainland.
已经回归了，这结束了一个100多年的殖民统治，回到那个中国人自己管理中国的地方，所以我们呢，觉得是很值得去庆祝的。
On the night of President Xi's arrival, Nathan Law and other activists staged a prohibited protest on a sculpture gifted by Beijing to mark the handover.
Anniversary of hangover. There's nothing left to be celebrated. But implementation of one-country system, and to urge the Beijing government to grant Hong Kong democracy.
Police arrest and detain Nathan Law, Joshua Wong in 24 hours.
I understand that the rest of the world want to do business with China, okay? But Britain cannot escape its legal and moral responsibility to Hong Kong. When China made it plain that it's not a high degree of autonomy after all, it's whatever I choose to give you. Why did Britain not speak up?
Back at the jockey club, the gamblers place their bets.
Like there's a phrase like a frog in a hot water. If you just put the temperature up slowly and slowly, you get used to it, but then you still eventually die.
For many, there's a growing sense that the outcome for Hong Kong has already been rigged.
Okay, this is Hong Kong, returning China history.
What it means, understand you saying that some Hong Kongese, while they're going to immigrate to the other countries, but some of them is still living in Hong Kong, and someone is going to work in China.
Yeah, of course. Why not? I told you, you're living in China, you're living in Hong Kong. If you don't speak out political issues or criticize Chinese government, no problem at all. Right?
You mean it's a better place for them
Yeah.
to afford
Yeah.
apartment to live and so what still be hired.
Yeah, they said, okay, Chinese government tried to manipulate the price of cost of condominium in Hong Kong, doubling up. So many people, they cannot stay there. Okay, you can go out. Okay, Chinese government provides you more cheaper place in China. You can commuting from, now they try to, very good commuting tools from Shenzhen to Hong Kong or suburbs, mainland in China. So you can rent house or rent condominium, 1/3 or 1/5. So why not you commuting to China to Hong Kong? This is their strategy. And those people making kind of video. They do not explain what's happening, what's going on. Maybe Chinese CCTV makes something like that, right? But I don't see it. But my guess is like that. You consider it's too expensive in Hong Kong. Unbelievable. Right?
Okay, and one more thing, I don't know what happened, what's gonna happen exactly as Anson Chen spoke in this video that the Britain cannot be free from the taking some responsibility on the legal and moral issues.
Why?
What does it mean?
Oh, this is reason simple. It's like, for example, they prepare the election college and selecting 1,200 people, and they favor for Chinese government, and British government support Chinese government. And Anson Chan said, why? Why this? They British try not to keep promise for democracy. Okay, reason is simple. British need money for economic prosperity, and they just misjudgment for the Brexit, right? So they need to more coordinate with China, and China is their one biggest customer next decade. So Hong Kong is small island for them. That's the reason they don't support Hong Kong democracy. They don't care.
So no more more reasons.
Of course.
Yeah, I didn't know too. What is written in the upper part of your material, some explanation, description up in upper part. There's some proposal from Britain when the Hong Kong was handed over to China. Was rejected.
What rejected? What did you say?
Can you go up on the material?
I can't hear you. What? Say again?
Can you go back to upper part of the word file?
Say again.
There was some description in the upper part of this material. In the word file, in the upper part of explanation, some introduction of Hong Kong. In word file.
You say word file? What is word file?
This one and up, going back to upper part. Can it go a little more up to?
Which one? English or Japanese?
English.
Okay. Which one? This is the top of the English sentences. You're talking about universal suffrage or just
attempts to bring Hong Kong citizens onto negotiating table by British during this World discussion were rejected by Beijing in late 1980s.
Oh, 1980.
How? Yeah, I don't know how Britain wanted Hong Kong to have.
Oh, 1980s. Just remember what the situation of Beijing in 1980s. Okay. 1980, 35 years ago. Is 1980s what the year of 1980s? What the year of China?
What was rejected by Beijing?
Yeah. So they did not good communication with the Western world. Beijing did at that time, 1980s after Cultural Revolution. Before Deng Xiaoping's open market.
At the time, Britain wanted Hong Kong citizens to declare something in saying they want keep.
Yeah, I think so. At that time, I think so. At that time, China and the Western world, they had bad communication relationship at that time, I believe. But since then, China changed situation. They opened the market. Deng Xiaoping an open market, and Hong Kong utilized Hong Kong for the doing business for betterment, right?
Okay. So after that, the China opened the market in mainland, and it has grown up. And as far as the economy in mainland is good, we need to have some deal.
Yeah, let me try to check, Are they going to show? Oh, hold on. The 90th century, no, it's true. 20th century. What's this? 19, no, this is, no, this, how can I say, child history. Chinese child history, child recent history. Oh, this is a colonial history better. Yeah. 78. Oh, Deng Xiaoping in 78. Around 1980.
So 80s is when the China is about to open the market.
Yeah, just open the market. I don't know they happened, what kind of treatment in Hong Kong and Chinese government 1980, like this. They open the market, they deal in business, and they accepted Shenzhen. They invested a lot of money for Shenzhen to accelerate industrial park at that time. They don't say in detail something. Okay, let's move into the next. Okay. This one, it's Hanson Chan. Next one is why democracy in Hong Kong matters. And this is 2014. Beijing's recent pronouncements that only patriotic Hong Kong people can stand for chief executive coupled with violent attacks on the media have raised concern about basic rights and freedoms in the territory of 7 million people. With the 2017 and 2020 elections on the horizon, Chinese leaders are making increasingly clear they intend to install politicians they can control, an ominous sign for Hong Kong's autonomy and freedoms, not to mention the economy, which relies on transparency and the rule of law. Martin Lee and Anson Chan. Martin Lee is a rightist person. Okay, Anson Chan, two veteran political leaders known and respected for their decades of service in Hong Kong's legislature and government, will outline the growing threats to democracy in Hong Kong and what can be done to defend rights and freedoms in Hong Kong. I just explained that just two persons. Lee Chen-min. This is just Martin Lee. 彼は香港の弁護士なんですけど、非常に右寄りですよね。右寄りで。これちょっと。
主義の犬。
これいらない。こうやってね、植民地の犬って言われて。あと、アンソンちゃんね。アンソンちゃんもいい年だよね。まあ、家柄いい家柄ですからね。 彼女は香港の警察の総監との旦那の結婚してたね。うん。まあそういうことですな。うん。ウィキペディアからコピーしたけど、非常に詳しく書いてるね。で、ここからはこの、ビデオの内容。さっき言った冒頭に言った、香港のカーバリーの記述はこのビデオから撮ってきたのね。うん。で、これアンソンちゃんが言ってんだよね。香港のカーバリーは譲歩してはならないってね。で、さっき僕が言ったように、どうかなっていうところもありますよね。で、あと、ここに書いてある毎日150人までの本土の中国人受け入れを許可している。選定本土。これは中国から本土に入ってくる中国人。
150人。
これなんかね、150人とこれ例えば、ちょっとね、居住する人だと思うんですよ。観光客なんかね、何千人も入ってくるから。150人、1500人、15000人。年間だと5万人ぐらいよ。年間5万人を、香港に住むことを居住受け入れてんだね。だから、これ居住って書いた方がいいね、きっとね。うん。上海がね、香港に動かして。だから、アンソンちゃんが言うのは、カーバリューが、上海と比べてね、香港が、アドバンテージあるよって彼女は盛んに言ってんだよ。これが、オープン性とかこれがあるから香港はいいよって言ってる。まあちょっと、どうかなっていうところありますよね。でこれ単語いっぱいあるんですよ。多分長いんだな。unyielding, remind, genuinely, hallelujah, convergent, blatant, paralyzed, universal suffrage, untainted, これもよく出てくるね。untainted, affiliation, predicated, size up, size up, patently, undermine, parallel, proposition, embarrassment, acquiesce, pull one's punches. あんまり聞いたことない。pull one's punches. paramount, velocity. これよく出ますね。discharge, rudder, これは聞いたことないな。わだ。プレート。プロマルゲート。アットステーク。これしょっちゅう出ますね。アットステーク。モノレスティック。時々出ますね。モノレスティック。ビジョン。ビジョン。ジューフォース。これは中国の専門のこと、天安門事件のことですね。ジューフォース。天安門事件のことですね。allows, surveillance, interject, eloquent, consequentialist, normative, cheat, subvert, これしょっちゅう出ますね。subvert, resort, motive, scent, articulate, unfettered, at the juncture, at this juncture. これあんまり使わないね。だけど、at this juncture って今ここでって意味だね。opaque, arbitrarily, precarious, infect, conviction, 長いね、単語。hold, a hold of, mandate, chew, constellation, これもよく出ますね。constellation, precedence, あんまり聞かないな。precedence, plank, これよく出る。pap, これはあんまり知らないね。keep on one's toes, keep on one's toes. これもあんまり使わないね。OK、単語いっぱいだな。これも結構20分ぐらいかな。
And we want to welcome our visitors very warmly.
Oh my God, 1時間。
We want to say thank you to the audience for joining us, as well as the VOA and Radio Free Asia. We are happy to mark an anniversary, actually, Martin, especially related to you, because it's 17 years ago this week, in April 1997, that NED presented Martin with our annual Democracy Award. And the photograph is on the wall here somewhere, in fact. We cited your role as founder and chairman of Hong Kong's first political party, your unyielding defense of the principle of one country, two systems, and we honored you for...
I tell you, those guys' discussion is very comfortable for us. So, 1 hour is not so much big problem for us, okay? Just listen. Very comfortable what they're talking about. But he is, just Chinese government said he's dog or something, dog of capitalism or something like that. The Chinese government hate him, but she is also Westerner side of person. But those people talking about very comfortable for Japanese people. Listen.
Your vigorous support of freedom of the press, full democratic elections, the rule of law, and human rights. So this has been a continuous effort, and we're happy to have marked that occasion and have you here again on the anniversary. And we're very happy to welcome for the first time Anson Chan, who has such a long and distinguished career in public service in Hong Kong, both in the executive branch with a landmark role as the first ethnic Chinese in that role, and also in the legislative branch afterwards, and now a public figure on the issue of the future of democracy in Hong Kong. We want to thank our partner, Human Rights Watch and Minky Warden, and all those who've made this event possible. We'll first just ask you how things went in New York. We'll go ahead with a few conversational items here, and then we will be allowing the audience to make comments or questions. So do keep those in mind. So you've been in New York. You had a public event at the Asia Society. Let us know how that went. What questions came up?
It went well, but as I was walking in, I was reminded by a friend here that the last time I came, I said to him that I won't come back to Washington unless something terribly is going wrong, and that's why we're here.
I think we were very encouraged, first of all, at the size of the audience, and particularly at how well informed they were, and how genuinely interested they were in knowing what Hong Kong is like 70 years after the pandemic. I never thought that I would appear on the same platform as Martin. But the fact that we are both here should give you some indication as to the degree of concern that we have about what is happening in Hong Kong. I was checking out two students amongst this audience who come from the University of Science and Technology. And I asked them, I said, are you concerned about what's happening in Hong Kong? The answer was yes. So what are you concerned about? We're concerned that whether our rights to treat will be protected. I think in a few words, that precisely sums up the degree of concern that we now see.
This is really make or break for us. For so many years, Beijing has been postponing democracy, although it was clearly promised. We should have had it in 2007, but now we are not even going to have it in 2017, because Beijing would like to give Hong Kong people the vote. One person, one vote, but subject to Beijing's nomination. In other words, Beijing will give us puppet A, puppet B, and hallelujah, we elect one. So, and without democracy, how can we really implement successfully one country, two systems? Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy. If we can't even choose our leaders, how can we make sure that our leaders would defend our interests and our rights, particularly when Beijing might not like them to do so? You see, we need democracy to make sure our leaders, elected leaders, will find it necessary, not convenient, for them to defend Hong Kong's rights. And they must, if they want to be re-elected again, put Hong Kong's case strongly and will not allow themselves to be dictated to by Beijing. And then we begin to have a hope. But at the moment, things are going terribly wrong. We are going downhill at such a high speed that when we converge with China, we'll be converging low. And for years, my hope was to make sure that Hong Kong, if it goes down at all, it will come down very slowly, so that Beijing will grow, China will improve, hopefully, sooner than later. And when we converge, we can converge high. But at the rate things are going, when we converge, we'll be low. And that cannot be good for China, cannot be good for Hong Kong.
We are facing an identity crisis in Hong Kong, particularly in the younger generation. People born after 1987 who's never known life other than under Chinese sovereignty. Now, Hong Kong people pride themselves on the fact that we have an identity that is separate from the rest of China. We have core values rooted firmly in the rule of law, in open, transparent, accountable government, in protecting the rights and freedoms that we enjoyed under British colonial rule and which are protected under our constitution, the Basic Law. But today, we see all these values being eroded. We no longer see a firm commitment on the part of Beijing and on the part of the Hong Kong SAR government to defend one country, two systems. One country, two systems is all about giving Hong Kong people a high degree of autonomy and Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong. And yet, we are...
Okay, just move. This video is 2014. Okay?
Seeing increasingly blatant interference from Beijing's organs stationed in Hong Kong, which is known as the Liaison Office. They have no role to play under the Basic Law. In fact, the Basic Law makes it quite clear that no centrally based organ in Hong Kong can interfere in the internal administration of Hong Kong, which is the responsibility of the SAR government. So it is a little wonder that we see that the ultimate solution and the only way to help Hong Kong maintain its separate identity is to press for full democracy. It's a very modest request. We are asking for no more than that Beijing delivers on its promise to the people of Hong Kong, which is that in 2017, we can, on the basis of free, open election, elect our chief executive, and at the latest, again on the basis of free elections, we can elect all members of the legislature. We have a chief executive currently who has no political legitimacy. We see an increasingly paralyzed government, and little wonder, because in the legislature of 17 members, the government doesn't have a single voice.
May I ask about that? It's been raised actually by Larry Diamond, who was intending to be in Hong Kong just last month for a seminar hosted by the University of Hong Kong Center for Legal and Constitutional Matters, and which is hosting a whole series of seminars actually on the question of the election of the chief executive in 2017. And well, first of all, he had a very nice quote in the press, and I wondered if you would comment on it. He said, "The authorities in Beijing have the power and authority to determine whether Hong Kong will achieve democracy at a particular point in time, but they do not have the right to redefine what democracy is."
Of course. Can you imagine that although democracy was promised to us in the Basic Law, we are still trying to argue. We're still arguing, what is democracy? Now, Beijing says universal suffrage? Fine. That means one person, one vote. So we'll give the people the vote, as I said, but we select the candidates. And they say this is in accordance with international standards. But of course it's nonsense, because the ICCPR, the National Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, applies to Hong Kong. The Basic Law, our Constitution, says so. And of course, the Basic Law itself, our Constitution, also provides, in Article 26, that permanent residents of Hong Kong have the right to vote and to stand for elections. So how can Beijing say, because you are not Democrat, you're excluded? That is democracy according to Chinese characteristics. You cannot have that.
It's wonderful that you emphasize that the ICCPR does apply to Hong Kong. As we know, China has signed but not ratified it, but in this case, the Basic Law specifically makes reference to it. This, in fact, for those who are interested, there's a whole series of seminar papers on the website about this question of Article 25, which is the one that says every citizen shall have the right and the opportunity to vote and to be elected at genuine periodic elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage, guaranteeing the free expression of the will of the voters. So then the question comes down to, as you said, the nominating committee. So let's talk a little bit about some of the specifics of the potential format for 2017, both the realistic range of what you're really urging happens in Hong Kong. How would you make, if there's going to be a nomination process that may not be by party, but rather by some kind of nomination committee or other process, how would you make it? Are there proposals to make it broadly representative in a way that would satisfy your concerns about the Hong Kong people governing Hong Kong and to allow a truly independent choice on the part of voters?
Well, my group, of which I'm the convener, is known as Hong Kong 2020. We recently put out a set of proposals, which is an attempt to try and bridge the sharp divide in Hong Kong on which way to move on universal suffrage, and to bring the proposals back within the strict framework of the Basic Law. And the only way that you can ensure that it is fair, open election, which is that people have a right to vote, people have a right to nominate, and people have the right to stand for election. At the end of the day, a credible set of proposals must have, in our view, three basic criteria. The first is you have to give voters genuine choice, not somebody anointed by Beijing. The second, You cannot set down unreasonable restrictions preventing people from standing for election. Now, you can have reasonable restrictions such as age, such as residence qualification. It's not acceptable to say, I don't happen to like what you say, or I simply don't like your face, so therefore you are debarred. And finally, we think that you must allow people of different political affiliations to have the right to be nominated and to stand for election. So our proposals are predicated on these three basic criteria. And what we hope to achieve by our proposals is to widen the nominating committee so that it is truly broadly representative. And we are giving the right to nominate to all 3.4 registered voters in Hong Kong. So that way, and we are also at the same time insisting that there is a low threshold for people to get in and to become a potential candidate for chief executive.
So a certain number of names on a petition.
Yes, but we do not think you should artificially impose a number on how many candidates there should be. This should be a natural process of the nominating procedure.
See, another proposal, of course, is to stick with the nominating committee, but make it representative by constituting it all elected officials, even at the district councils, and perhaps some other additional, so that it would become, in that way, broad enough. Do you have a position on whether this would make it broad enough to produce the variety and diversity of candidates and freedom of choice?
But in fact, I don't mind what it is, so long as you don't give a particular group of people, in this case Beijing, the sole right of deciding who is going to run and who isn't.
Well, technically it's 800 people's right.
Yeah, but those people are not democratically elected by the people of Hong Kong. That's the thing. Yeah. And I don't mind if they say, okay, we have a nomination committee of 100, 200, 1,000, doesn't matter. So long as all of them are elected by universal suffrage.
Is this going to be a point of negotiation, do you think, when the Pan-Democrat delegation goes to Shanghai in 2 weeks? It is to talk about practical mechanisms for setting up the nomination field for 2017? I don't think either of you have planned to.
I think myself that it's really a political show. It shows that Beijing leaders are at least prepared to listen to the views of the Hong Kong people. But what can you do in one day?
It's a one-day meeting.
Yeah. What can you do?
So a serious meeting would be a little bit more like some of the past negotiations before the handover, when there were serious groups that met. Is there any chance of that happening? How do we that?
I don't think you will.
That might happen.
I don't think you will have serious discussion of the final package until Beijing has sized up what the community view is. They will also, I think, pay some attention to how the rest of the world is reacting when Beijing is patently seen to be not delivering on its promises. So between now and when the actual set of proposals come out, which I do not expect to happen until early next year, we have to keep up the fight. We have to let Beijing know what is it that we are demanding, entirely reasonable demands, because I do think that Beijing does care about public sentiment. They do care about how they are seen by the rest of the world. So it's very much up to us, with the support of our trading partners, to get that message across loud and clear.
Oh, that's wonderful. It really leads to two things I wanted to ask about. One is about the people of Hong Kong, why they care about democracy. They have a pretty nice life. We all, there's a reason why people love Hong Kong. It's a great city. So what both their fears? You've talked to people who are concerned about their rights and freedom, but what are the signs that people in Hong Kong, if you can review for us all, showing that they do have a concern and really need to call the attention of the central government authorities? That is something that needs to be responded to.
We don't have a pretty nice life. We see two systems being undermined. We see particularly our core values being eroded. What are these core values? Openness, transparency, level playing field, genuine competition, the rule of law, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, particularly freedom of the press. But we are seeing increasing signs of interference in these core values. And this is really what worries Hong Kong people. Because once our core values go, we lose our strength. And in my view, if we do not have these strengths, what sort of role can we play in the sustainable long-term economic growth of our country? And in particular, in its quest to be a modernized economy. It is precisely by clinging on to the rule of law and our core values. These are our strengths, and we give them up at our own peril.
Let's look at Hong Kong as a society. Many of you know Hong Kong. It is a mature society. It is civil society. It has all the qualities for democracy, even though I do not agree with the proposition that maybe some countries are not ready for democracy. There's no such thing as a right. But even if you say, okay, you've got to be ready before you can have democracy, can you name me a single country in the world which is in a better position to have democracy than Hong Kong today? And as for the overseas community, Beijing and London worked very hard in 1984 to get international support of their joint declaration over Hong Kong, because they were afraid, both China and Great Britain were afraid that there would be too many people leaving Hong Kong if the accord doesn't have universal support. So a lot of governments gave their open support to the joint declaration, one country, two systems, including the US government. Now, every government has supported the joint declaration and continues to support it, owes a moral obligation to the people of Hong Kong to speak up when something like today is going terribly wrong. And we are not asking you to twist arms. All we are asking for is fair play. After all, China promised democracy to Hong Kong. You are not twisting China's arm to give something which they never promised to give. They have already promised to give democracy. They are already in breach of their promises. They kept on postponing it. So it will be so easy to say, at least, that's your intention. Please do it. And that's all. And nobody in the world would object, I suppose, unless you are Beijing tyrants. Nobody in the world would object to democracy in Hong Kong or even in China. But where better to start democracy for China than in Hong Kong, where China, in its own policy, already promised democracy to the Hong Kong people. And so it's so natural to me that the US government, which has the avowed foreign policy of supporting every country for democracy and the rule of law, to follow its own policy over Hong Kong.
The legitimacy of international support for this internationally declared joint declaration, it wasn't a bilateral agreement that was supported, as you say, in a different policy of democratic governments of the world to support it. Can you give some gold stars of those who are stepping up, who have stepped up in the past to live up to their own declared policy goals? Can you give us some models of the kind of international figures around the world who are doing their best to support the people of Hong Kong?
Well,
too bad. I don't want to have so much silence.
Well, unfortunately, yes. We're not seeing nearly enough people standing up and being counted and say, hey, we're watching what is happening in Hong Kong. And particularly, we want to see whether you're delivering on your promises. You look at the co-signatories to the Joint Declaration, Great Britain. We're disappointed that they don't speak up more often. We actually have a very good U.S. Consul General in Hong Kong who speaks up, for which he is roundly criticized. Martin has pointed out that we wish the British Consul General in Hong Kong would do the same.
But to the British government, unfortunately, Hong Kong is an embarrassment to their China trade. And money talks. That's our difficulty. But then, surely, as a signatory to the Sino-British Joint Declaration, the British government owes the Hong Kong people a duty to defend our core values, in very clear terms what those core values are. But today, to the Chinese government, all these core values, which is just summarized, are stumbling blocks to their exercising full control over Hong Kong, which should not have happened. It's Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy. But they want to control the way our press would function. We had 4 very independent newspapers, and now I'm afraid there's only one, Apple Daily. And that one is under great pressure. Advertisers are persuaded by the Central Government Liaison Office in Hong Kong, the Communist branch office.
By the way, this is a very difficult discussion. What he's talking is right, but he understands what is China, okay, Chinese government, right? So even if he's speaking out the kind of issues, Chinese government never change. Anson Chan knows that also. But those people need to speak out, you know, that was the truth. Why the British government, they do not keep promise, right? But actually they cannot anyway, they cannot keep promise, consider for just those people say they consider for Chinese trade with China. So,
I think
go ahead.
I think what they're talking is not wrong. That the topic itself is not wrong, but what I think is missing point in discussion is there must be some reason why Hong Kong deserves to preserve their core values, even during time under the British control, and also after the hand over of Hong Kong to China. It sounds a little strange to me in this video, in watching this video, that Hong Kong's core value alone is being loudly required, and this is the only one thing that Hong Kong wants to keep in their system. What I mean is, as long as there must be another reason in other aspects that Hong Kong should enjoy democratic system. If so, there is some things making sense. I mean, okay, Hong Kong continues to grow in its economy, or Hong Kong is kind of the masterpiece of global economy to make some big contributions, some certain level of contribution from Hong Kong. As long as they can do it, then having democracy, conserving democracy is maybe one condition to be protected. But now Hong Kong is handed over to China, and the Shanghai is rising up the global hub of logistics and economy and trading and financial sector, as Hong Kong was before. then it doesn't have to be democracy at all, no more, in some certain sense. But if they were to make something new to differentiate themselves from Shanghai or Shenzhen, as some economic have for mainland China, then their demands, Hong Kong's demands, might be considered. But just being as they have been so, is not so. I think it doesn't make enough impact for China to consider Hong Kong should be in a democratic system.
Okay. Point is, those people knows the true definition of democracy. Okay? They follow on democracy's definition. And they just no compromise for Chinese ideology or Chinese regime systems. So they're right, okay? For 50 years, Chinese government never interfere Hong Kong democracy.
Yeah, it's just because Hong Kong's economy, Hong Kong's the position in the global economy is meaningful.
No. Okay. Actual world is different. This politician try to keep the true meaning of democracy. This is their discussion. Whenever they compromise, and they need to follow on Chinese regime. But this is actually they need to follow on Chinese regime anyway for doing business or doing political issues. Anyway, they need to obey to Chinese, mind or thinking approach or whatever. But they want to speak out. Okay, you make a promise. You made a contract, okay, with the Hong Kong people. So you need to keep promise. What is democracy? What is their speak on? This they are right. Right?
I don't know, they're not wrong, but I don't know if it's right. Because I'm saying this on purpose for, maybe it might invite arguments, and it's not someone's opinion in a good mind, but technically, in some sense, the China government can allow Hong Kong to enjoy democracy as long as Hong Kong's position is important, beneficial for Chinese government. Then this the value of Hong Kong in economic aspect or some political issues. If Hong Kong has this power and value, then this value is supported by this democratic system in Hong Kong. Then China may allow Hong Kong to keep that system. But as Hong Kong is being global financial hub, but it can be replaced easily now to Shanghai, then that same for the value is just same as Shanghai has or will have more than Hong Kong, then there's no reason for Chinese government to give the right of keeping the democracy to Hong Kong.
Okay, by the way, Chinese government understand what definition of what is democracy. Okay? But fundamentally, what Xi Jinping thinking? China is returned to the old imperialism. China govern the world. Okay? Hong Kong is Chinese territory and very small. They do not consider for their human life anything else. They Chinese, they don't consider for the whatever they are speaking out. But Hong Kong people, those people, okay, politicians, speak out like very similar to South China Sea, like Philippines proposed international court, and the international court announced this South China Sea is common sea, not Chinese one, right? So Chinese government cannot make like a military base in the South China Sea islands, but Chinese government neglected. A similar approach, the Chinese government doing that for Hong Kong. They are thinking, they are doing whatever they want. They believe Hong Kong is their territory. South China Sea is their territory. They do not have any compromise. But if you're going to change aspect, okay, free world people, Westerner people, okay, this is you promised, right? You need to follow on the rule of law. So Hong Kong can keep establishing or keep going democracy. Chinese government cannot interfere in a kind of democratic situation. This is they are talking about. So, of course, stance is different, but they try to keep speaking out. Their right, human right, or freedom of speech, freedom of press, whatever. They need to speak out. If they're going to speak out, Chinese were going to invade everything in Hong Kong. So it's like, for example, one example, why they're talking about keep going that repeatedly. Why they are speaking out that kind of opinion? Because of one example, Senkaku Island. Okay, Chinese warship coming to Senkaku Island. Okay, Japanese government sending surveillance ship, right? All the way around. Otherwise, with that kind of activity, Chinese will going to occupy Senkaku Island anytime soon. So 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, they try to keep going, protect the territory of Japanese territory. Same thing, Hong Kong people speaking out democracy. If they don't speak out democracy, China will going to occupy everything, like exactly the same like a Chinese regime. This is important.
Okay, how's this? While in someone's view, someone's eye, the Chinese way to Hong Kong may appear to break the law, break the promise that they made with the British when the Hong Kong is handed over to China. But in the eyes and in the view of other persons that might be Western world who has been breaking their promises, then that is that country in the Western world who has been changing the promise, who has been changing the condition of the promise, then always they're saying they keep the promise, then who is the opposite side who broke some part of the promise. So the Western world is given the chance to declare who has failed to keep the promises. The opposite side, Middle East, some Islam countries, and technically the thinking of the Chinese way, they are always thinking they're coming on some negotiation, even in the South China Sea, and some diplomatic issues. It may be their negotiation, some games to make negotiation. So if the Hong Kong side could have some negotiating cards to exchange some condition, the give and take basis, give and take. So the Chinese may agreed on making some compromise with Hong Kong's position. But if Hong Kong doesn't have anything to exchange, give and take, then it may be on Chinese. It may have to be on Chinese way.
Exactly. So
something needs to be to change. The Hong Kong also needs to have something new to show their new value or something that Chinese way cannot achieve. So it may be much easier for Hong Kong to negotiate with China. Maybe, just my guess.
So, if Hong Kong people are going to, that they are not going to speak out, they're not going to speak out their opinion, China will going to invade them, right? Because they have hegemony, okay, dominant in Asia Pacific, right? Okay, let's going to move on. This 20 minutes is still 40 minutes.
Take away the advertisement with Apple Daily. They were already advertising. Take away. And these are banks, international banks. They're the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. And they just did that. Now, when that happens, how can you expect press freedom to continue? It's so easy. So easy for these communists to say to these bankers, don't worry, take your advertisement away from this newspaper, give it to other newspapers, we will talk to your competitors. So don't worry, nobody will advertise with Apple Daily, you will suffer, the other newspapers go and do it. It's so easy. And so this newspaper is very thick, getting thinner, when the advertisements are no longer there.
I think it's extremely short-sighted for business to think that by acquiescing.
Oh, he said newspaper means Chinese bank advertisement on newspaper, or Chinese government don't advertisement in newspaper. The newspaper will going to be bankrupted. So they can manipulate. Okay, they newspaper listen to Chinese government opinion. Okay, we're going to give more advertisement, pay money.
Yeah, as recently Uno-san often mentioned that the CCTV and some news media in China is getting more open. But the one thing we are not allowed to do is to criticize straightforward with the criticizing the Chinese government, one ruling party. But the same is true on some other countries, like including Japan. Some press are not given a right, given any permission to criticize the emperor's family, emperor's history, but it's not known by the normal ordinary process.
Okay, Japan is for China. Japan is very easy to be handled, easy to, just doing whatever they like. Japan never speak out any opinion, right? Not like Hong Kong. Japanese people never talking about what is democracy against China, right? And they Japanese, they do not have any opinion, leader for the global people. They don't speak anything at all. So that for Chinese people or Korean people, very easy to handle or manipulate whatever kind of information, whatever they like. This is the current problems. Okay, Chinese CCTV or Chinese newspaper looks like very neutral, but they can speak out also. They can their own opinion. If you're going to looking about, I just is currently writing book for Latin America, democracy. Oh, any kind of YouTube is lots of Chinese articles, videos, no Japanese. Or you can find out any criticize the video for China. I can't find out any Chinese, what issue, Chinese problem of China. Only good, issue for Latin America. This is it means this is not neutral, right?
Yeah, what's feeling for the Japanese? We are given, basically we're given any right to speak out, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. All these the factors are allowed and given to the people, but we it seems that compared to China, Hong Kong, the other countries, our capability is not enough to enjoy that freedom. But while Chinese may have some limitation and restriction of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, that they are well capable of speaking out their opinion. They basically having their opinion to speak. So that is special.
I think your microphone is something wrong. I can't hear your last sentence. Okay. Now go. Okay. Say again.
Japan is in democratic system, and people can speak out anything they want. Then they can make some assembly of in any form they want. But compared to what other countries is doing, speaking out their opinion, exchange their opinion, sometimes in fighting. But Japanese is given a right, but we are not well capable of enjoying the rights.
Oh,
whereas in China, it may be the freedom is sometimes seems to be limited, but it seems they're well powerful or capable of speaking out their opinion.
Okay, freedom of speech, it means speak something, right?
Speak something, but we don't have opinion.
No, Japanese don't speak out anything, so what it means, speak freedom of speech? This is it's ridiculous, right? Okay, let's continue. Okay, I try to move on.
They're serving the best long-term interests. It is my experience that if you roll over and you put your punches, it will only encourage the Chinese to demand more the next time around.
Too many people in business in particular believe that if instead of shaking their hand with their Beijing counterparts, if they bow to give respect, they're going to have more business. But once you bow, they expect you to kneel down, and once you kneel down, they expect you to kneel down and kowtow. But if you stand firm, they have respect for you. Otherwise, if you kowtow to them, you are in their pocket. And who are you then? And if you are in business, surely the free flow of economic information is of paramount importance to you if you want to invest in anything. But when freedom of the press is under threat, and if it disappears from Hong Kong, how can your investment be safe? Be safe in Hong Kong? The rule of law still is okay. But you see, we are encountering a lot of problems. Xi Jinping, the president of China, 2 years ago came to Hong Kong and said to our Chief Justice and other senior officials on a public occasion that our judges must cooperate more with our government. That's his view. I mean, and I can understand that. As a communist leader, he expects the Hong Kong judges to behave like Chinese judges, cooperate with the government. Well, they're doing that in Singapore. But that can't be right. And a very senior judge in Hong Kong, sitting in the Court of Final Appeal, retired about a year ago. And on his retirement, he said that a storm of unprecedented ferocity is coming to Hong Kong. He was talking about the rule of law. And the rule of law is what makes Hong Kong a different city than all other Chinese cities. And even this judge.
What do you mean, ferocity? What do you mean, ferocity? Huh? Oh, ferocity. Not velocity, ferocity. Right? Okay.
Things that is under threat, coupled with the Chinese leaders' words to our Chief Justice, there should be great concern on the part of our overseas investors. But would they speak up? Would the Chambers Commerce speak up? They rather other people do it for them.
Well, there's one opportunity coming up. I wanted to go back to one of the policy instruments that in this country has been used to support the for One Country, Two Systems, which is the Hong Kong Policy Act of 1992. And if maybe you could remind us what's in that act and tell us whether you thought it did some good and what's next.
Well, the act was introduced by Senator Mitch McConnell. It's called the Mitch McConnell bill at the time. The policy was based on One Country, Two Systems. So that act requires the U.S. government to treat Hong Kong as separate from the rest of China in terms of trade quotas in those days, immigration quotas, and other things. Treating Hong Kong as separate from China. Now, and yet, on many of my previous visits to Washington, D.C., I was told by people that don't expect too much. There is too much on our China plate. And my answer has always been, fine, no problem. Because there is a separate Hong Kong plate. And under your act of Congress, and the Hong Kong plate is empty. It's smaller, of course, but it's empty. So there is no reason why your government should, because of other matters concerning China,
than to ignore its moral obligations towards the people of Hong Kong.
So if this is now, I understand, action is needed to reauthorize?
Well, the reporting has stopped, I think, 15 years after the Act was enacted, was promulgated in 1992. But that is one of our objectives of going to the Hill, and that is try to persuade that the yearly reporting should be reintroduced, so that members of Congress would know what's happening.
Very good. And now let me ask you something a little more out of the mainstream, which is whether do you think there are interests in China itself who may agree with you in principle, who may understand what's at stake, who perhaps quietly are learning from your experience? Who are the constituents that you see in China who have also a concern for the future?
I think it's important to bear in mind that the leadership hierarchy is not monolithic. You have those who are more open-minded, more reform-minded, and yes, you have the hardliners. What I think we in Hong Kong need to do is to make sure that we give some encouragement to the moderate voice in China pressing for changes, because they believe this to be in the best interest of China as a whole. We actually have people in the mainland coming to Hong Kong to participate in the annual candlelight vigil to commemorate June the 4th. We have mainlanders coming to Hong Kong to participate in the now annual July the 1st demonstration. And we have people coming up to me, to Martin, urging us to keep up the fight, because that is the only way in which they themselves are going to be able to influence the way that the country as a whole moves. So we have to give some encouragement to this moderate voice, in the same way as when we receive support from countries around the world. People in Hong Kong draw encouragement from there. Any
questions or comments from the audience, and see whether you'd like to make any comments here. So we have one from a media representative. Yes, so I'll call on Radio Free Asia, right here in the front row. And the mic is coming to
Martin and Anson, welcome to town. But I have to say, since I listened to your Cantonese and Mandarin, I differentiate that your speeches has different tones. When you mention China, you mention Zhongyang or Beijing in Cantonese. But when you mention in English, you normally use the communists. So my question would be, would you be more tough, or should you be more tough in Hong Kong in bringing out that the so-called Beijing government is still a communist ruling party that handle the things that are very rigid? Would you do more in arousing Hong Kong people's awareness that the sovereign countries, in fact, still a hardline communist leader? Thank you.
I think Hong Kong people know precisely that. I mean, how many people in Hong Kong would not know that the central government in Beijing consists of communists and only communists, because there's a one-party state. But Hong Kong people surely know that.
Well, maybe as a career civil servant, I tend to be more cautious. I'm always very conscious of the fact that it is one country, two systems. And if we about one-party system rule in Beijing, we need to, draw a fine balance in how we are seen to be criticizing Beijing one-party system rule. Because this is one thing that they do fear. They're afraid that we will, impose our values on mainland China. They're afraid that if they give Hong Kong people one man, one vote, we will elect a chief executive who will confront Beijing at every turn. Not so. There is absolutely no foundation for this sort of belief. I have no doubt that if tomorrow you give the vote to Hong Kong people, they will use that vote in their hands very wisely. They will elect a chief executive who can deal with China, with the mainland, and at the same time has the support of Hong Kong people because he is fully committed to implementing two systems.
May I interject then a question on that? front, which is the question not so much of the principle, the promise, even the desires of the Hong Kong people to ensure their checks and balances to preserve their core principles in the way of life, and all the very eloquent arguments you've made for why democracy is really important for the people of Hong Kong. What about a pure consequentialist rather than theoretical argument, which is, or normative argument, which is simply the governability question? If the chief executive loses measures of legitimacy, you mentioned this yourself about, without party allies in the legislature, even in an executive-led government, what does that do for governability, the ability to address public policy questions? And is that really coming? Are there ways to do surveys to get at that? And if so, would it be persuasive to some in Beijing that having to boost the legitimacy of the government in Hong Kong is in the interest of the central government to have a governable Hong Kong rather than one where...
No, you are absolutely right. I mean, we're fighting for democracy, not just because it is our basic right, not just because it is a promise that Beijing made solemnly to the people of Hong Kong, but at the root of it all is the whole question of governability of Hong Kong. Now, the chief secretary of the current SAR government has said on several occasions that if we make no progress on achieving genuine universal suffrage in 2017, then in her view, Hong Kong will become increasingly ungovernable. We have a chief executive who has no political mandate to govern. Political parties are not encouraged in Hong Kong, although it is only by local legislation, and we can easily change local legislation on our own. So, and it must matter to the business sector that this government can govern Hong Kong effectively, can be seen to be tackling thorny, difficult issues that have an impact on the whole business environment.
The current chief executive doesn't command the respect or trust of Hong Kong people at all. He is called in a number of Chinese newspapers as the lying chief executive, because the public perception is that he won the election in 2012 by cheating the public that he had no illegal structures at his home, and he actually accused his principal opponent of having illegal structures at his home. So there's absolutely no credibility with Hong Kong people, and therefore sometimes he comes up with good proposals, and even then the Hong Kong people won't support it. And on this current issue of how to go about the electoral laws, how to amend them, he won't even dare to say anything now. Originally he said that that was his portfolio. Now he passed it on to the chief secretary, because he knows that if he were to push for it, it would be much worse than now. So how can you have a leader? Where in the world would you find a leader who has lost completely the trust of the people he governs? Now, in a democratic country or city, of course he would have gone. But he's still aspiring for a second term in 2017.
Think about ways to make the case more strongly to the people making policy in Beijing. I mean, it seems to me this is one of the strongest things that needs to be brought to their attention, rather than argument about defining democracy, because as we've seen in China's entire system, as well as for the future of Hong Kong, it spent a lot of time arguing about what the promise was and what would fulfill it, and maybe some more appeal to interest and governability may make some more headway. So the next person is in the back, and then please do identify yourself, everyone who gets the microphone.
Hi, my name is Nadia Chao, Washington correspondent for Liberty Times from Taiwan. Actually, there was a big demonstration in Taiwan, and many people, one of the slogans they said is that they don't want to become next Hong Kong. So, from your point of view, especially the economic agreement you made with China, would you give us, an idea how that benefits or damages Hong Kong's future? And also, do you think Taiwan can do more for, Hong Kong's democracy? How could these two, society work together?
Thank you. I think the closer economic integration between Hong Kong and the mainland is normal, to be expected, and generally welcomed by the community. But what concerns the community now is the growing sense that Beijing is using economic integration, economic sweetness to subvert two systems and to erode our core values. And the community as a whole, particularly the younger generation, will not stand for this. And what has happened recently in Beijing, I think actually gives encouragement, particularly to the younger generation, that in the event that Beijing fails to deliver a credible set of universal suffrage proposals, they might resort to the same action. I hope sincerely it won't come to that. But there is concern. We welcome economic integration, but we are not prepared to accept economic integration at the expense of giving up our core values.
I think economic cooperation would be a better word. But one sees only too clearly that Beijing is using that for a particular motive. And the motive is to make Hong Kong getting more and more economically dependent on Beijing of their independence. One in 1997. The name is Joshua Wong. A year ago, it was revealed that the Hong Kong government wanted to brainwash our kids at schools. And Joshua Wong and his young students formed an alliance of young students from different schools, and they demonstrated in the streets against that. Originally, there were about 20 of them, and then it grew to larger numbers, supported by parents. There was another group of parents, nothing to do with political parties. So the group of students and the group of parents continued to demonstrate until there were 100,000 people gathered around central government, our government, in their offices. And that forced the government openly to abandon the sort of patriotic education. So we have a young student leader.
Terrific. We have, I believe, two ambassadors right in the front row. We better call on them next. Do we have the microphone down here? Yes, either one.
Thanks. I'm Mark Lagon, a Georgetown faculty and the Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you for coming to the United States. Don't be strangers, even for those who are professionally devoted to promoting democracy. You remind us of the principles that we are working on right now. I was very interested in your description of the intimidation or the suasion being delivered on the business community and advertising in Apple Daily. I wondered if two of you might speak to freedom of the press and freedom of expression and the balance between actual censorship, actual pressure, pressure behind the scenes, and self-censorship. Your feeling now at this stage.
Well, self-censorship has been a cause for concern for several years now. But a series of recent incidents culminating in this very vicious attack against the ex-chief editor of Ming Pao. He was brutally attacked and slashed, and he's going to be in hospital for a long, long time. Plus, the sacking of a very popular talk show hostess simply because she is articulate and she's a vocal critic of the government. The fact that increasingly Beijing seems to be muscling in on press comments, press commentary, and using the liaison office to apply pressure on what are purely commercial decisions about where you place your advertisements. So all this has led Hong Kong people to wonder, how much longer are we going to have press freedom? What is going to happen to free flow of information and freedom of expression? It's not just that Hong Kong people are worried about hanging on to this very basic right, but the commercial sector should be concerned too, because surely the commercial sector want an unfettered press, free flow of information. You want a certain business environment. You want access to accurate, available information. So how does it serve the commercial interest if you muscle in to requests from the liaison office to do this and do that? It's the first step down a slippery slope.
To me, freedom of the press is the freedom of all freedoms. Because without it, then when your other freedoms are taken away from you, nobody will know about it. And so as this happens in Hong Kong like this, getting worse and worse, there is every reason for fear that what was promised to us in 1984 in the Sino-British Joint Declaration, everything is fast disappearing. That is why we must do something. We must be able to do something to stop this erosion of our freedoms. And that is to make sure that when we do elect our chief executive and our legislators in 2017 and 2020 respectively, it must be genuine democracy. Otherwise our leaders would not find it necessary to stand up for Hong Kong.
We want a free press because, apart from other considerations, a free press plays a very important role as a check and balance against executive power. And it's particularly important at this juncture in Hong Kong because we have a government that is increasingly opaque, that takes decisions that go against their publicly stated stance. And we're none the wiser. And it doesn't serve business interests, because if you chop and change, and you can arbitrarily make decisions to affect the business environment, where does this business sector stand? And we've had some very good recent examples of this. The government had a declared policy that it's going to issue freely licenses for free TV licenses without limit, so long as the applicants meet basic qualifications. This was the government's stated policy. So 3 applicants put in their submissions for this free TV license. And out of the blue, against his own professional advice, against advice from his own cabinet, the chief executive decided, no, we're not going to issue 3 licenses in response to 3 applications. I have decided we will do this in a steady and gradual manner, and we are only going to issue 2 licenses. And the public draws the right conclusion that the 3rd applicant is being denied a license because the government doesn't happen to like what he has been saying. And yet, in the public eye, he's the only one who is prepared to put money in to produce quality TV drama series that the public wanted to see. So why is the government doing this? This is just, one illustration of how this government is becoming increasingly opaque and doing all sorts of things behind the scene. And we're none the wiser until it actually hits us. And there's nothing we can do because we have no power to vote him out of office.
I'm Grover Joseph Rees, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about what Anson Chan said about people from China coming to Hong Kong, participating in demonstrations, coming up to her and to other pro-democracy advocates and saying, please keep it up because it's our only chance. On the one hand, that's wonderful, and that's what we all hoped one country, 2 systems might produce. On the other hand, given the precarious state of democracy in Hong Kong, isn't this the very last thing you want the government in Beijing to know about? Isn't it the very thing they're worried about? Actually, if they could be sure that democracy in Hong Kong would not infect the mainland, wouldn't they be more likely to give it to you?
Well, I can well understand the reluctance on the part of the Beijing leaders to let Hong Kong enjoy democracy. But surely, if they want China to continue to grow economically and to grow into a world power, not just in terms of money, but in terms of ensuring that their people's rights are respected by the state, surely it has to follow. And if Beijing is reluctant to start with democracy in mainland China, then the very good thing to do is to let Hong Kong develop democracy as was already promised. Because I'm sure that it will work well for Hong Kong. And then China can then take comfort and then say, well, there's really nothing to worry about. This is Chinese society. They have democracy now. Things are going very well, even better than before. Then that will give them courage and confidence to start with their own villages, towns, and cities, and provinces, and finally to the whole state. So Hong Kong can be a special democratic zone.
All right, so we'll ask Buchong's Herring to give his question next.
Buchong from the International Campaign for Tibet. Both of you seem to indicate that there's a failure in the Chinese government's implementation of its promises for the Hong Kong people at a broader level. But I wonder whether you could comment on a specific clause in the Basic Law that was also put in to preserve and protect Hong Kong's identity, namely not allowing Chinese from mainland to settle permanently in Hong Kong. How has the Chinese people taken that clause in the Basic Law? Because in the Tibetan case, when the Tibetans have started saying that they needed to have Tibetans majority in the Tibetan areas, the Chinese government has been using that with the Chinese people to say that Tibetans don't want Chinese in Tibetan areas. So I was wondering how the Hong Kong people have been able to manage with that and how the Chinese people have reacted to it.
Let me just clarify. It is true that the mainlander cannot just come into Hong Kong and expect to settle permanently. But we do actually have a binding agreement with mainland authorities whereby under the one-way permit scheme, we take into Hong Kong for permanent residency 150 people a day. Now, these are largely for family reunion purposes, because over the years we've seen people in Hong Kong marrying mainlanders. They have children, but they have to come into Hong Kong in an orderly way under this quota. And in a way we welcome this because our natural population is below net replacement rate, and we do need an active working population to sustain Hong Kong's economic growth. But Hong Kong is a very, very small place with limited facilities and limited social and health facilities. So we need to regulate the numbers coming in. And these people come in, and to the extent that we are successful in assimilating them, they are as much a part of the community as people born in Hong Kong.
The problem about that is the implementation, because the Hong Kong government has no say at all as to who these 150 guys who are coming into Hong Kong on a one-way permit, because the one-way permit was issued by the central government, and it will not consult Hong Kong. So maybe some of these guys are totally undesirable people with previous convictions and so on. And yet the Hong Kong government has given no say as to who should not be allowed to come in. They decide. And of course, they use that, they abused it, because they allow many of their agents or spies to come into Hong Kong. And then later on, their families will come to Hong Kong, their family members will come to Hong Kong for reunion. So, for reunion purposes, and very often these people come and they register themselves first. They get a Hong Kong identity card, which is not a permanent one, only a Hong Kong identity card. They go back to China, wait for 7 years, they come again, and say, now, we have been living in Hong Kong for 7 years. The immigration office will not check, turn a blind eye to that, give them a chop. They become permanent residents of Hong Kong. They are registered as voters. And so, on the election day, a lot of these people will be bussed from mainland China into Hong Kong. Each will be given a number. You just vote for number 2, and they do it, not knowing anything about Hong Kong. And so, there are many of people of that kind, about 300,000.
But if there's anti-mainland sentiment among Hong Kongers, is that bad for Hong Kong because it allows mainland public opinion to think Hong Kong people are?
Well, it should be that way. I mean, you're right in saying that there is a degree of hostility between Hong Kong people and between mainlanders. But this has come about because the government has failed to control the numbers, has failed to ensure that we have the capacity to receive these people. And you cannot blame Hong Kong people. You know, parents want to buy milk powder for their babies. And yet all the milk powders have been bought up by mainlanders coming in several times a day, buying up these milk powder and then doing business when they go across the border. In the same way, at one time, maternity beds were taken out by pregnant women from the mainland. And Hong Kong pregnant women cannot find a hospital bed to deliver their babies. So little wonder that there is this growing hostility. But it need not be that way. And the government can do something about it. There is also some hostility because we see hordes, hundreds of millions of mainland visitors. Yes, they do a great deal to boost our economy, and we welcome them. But they come in, they're not aware of our local culture, our local practices. I mean, mundane things like, for example, we're used to queuing up at bus stops. They're not. They come in and cut in any old house. And their personal habits also sometimes leave something to be desired. But it's something that you can do something about. I remember, I wasn't born in Hong Kong. I was born in Shanghai. I came to Hong Kong with my family in 1948. And I remember in the 50s and the 60s, the government used to mount huge annual campaigns to tell people you cannot spit in the streets, you cannot throw rubbish in the streets. So in the same way, I think we can mount similar educational programs. I'm sure mainlanders want as much to fit in with the local culture, with the local practices as possible, but they're not used to this. And furthermore, there's a real problem in that you have rich mainlanders coming in, buying up everything inside, hiking up property prices, so that today young people who want to buy their own property find that all the properties are way beyond their affordability. So the government needs to address this fundamental problem. But we don't want mainlanders to feel that they are not welcome. They do. A lot of our businesses now in Hong Kong rely on mainland visitors.
All right, these are the byproducts of a successful Hong Kong. Why do people from the mainland come and buy our milk powder? Because their milk powder is already good.
All right, let's collect 2 questions at a time so that we can make sure we address more of the questions. So in the back under the camera, and then here with the red glasses. So one after the other.
Hi, Claudia Rosette with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Hi, Martin. I've been following this for a long, long time, and it always strikes me as ironic that if you behaved as do, say, the Palestinians, you would be getting world attention and negotiations and talks, or if you made yourselves a tremendous trouble to the rest of the world, there would be a lot more people here today. Instead, you are polite, you reason according to the declarations and promises that you got, and honestly, I have this terrible, overwhelming sense I've had since the 1980s of this steamroller that the world will not stop. My question is, could you tie this in for us more to the wider world? Russia has just chewed off a piece of Crimea despite an international agreement. Taiwan is looking at that. Where does Hong Kong sit in the constellation of precedents that are actually terribly important to... Yeah, I'm trying to lean in this question. I think it does. But where does it sit? Can you locate it for us in today's world order, which is in some jeopardy on many fronts?
World order. All right, let's take another question so we can get them.
Thank you very much. My name is Zhang Hong. I'm actually a journalist from China's Caixin Media, which is a Beijing-based media organization. Actually, I want to follow up with the previous point about the image of Hong Kong among the mainland people, because of the milk powder embargo and also those restrictions on pregnant women into Hong Kong, it created sort of very negative image of Hong Kong among ordinary Chinese people, because they don't understand what democracy was about, why Hong Kong was fighting for democracy, but they do care about the possibility of going to Hong Kong to buy political products for their babies and to enjoy the freedom in Hong Kong. So I think something needs to be done. More needs to be done in terms of communicating with mainland people. It's not just about increasing the capability of Hong Kong government to govern. It's also about communication. And also, I want to ask a question about what we are seeing the rise of Shanghai and Shenzhen as financial centers in China, and Hong Kong has traditionally played a strategic role in terms of being the financial center of bridging the capital flow into mainland China. So do you worry that with the rise of Shanghai and Shenzhen, with the weakening of democratic institutions in Hong Kong, the prospect for Hong Kong to stand up against Beijing and to demand its legitimate demands would be undermined?
Great, thank you. All right, so let's see if we can, the international and the...
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Claudia. Hong Kong is tiny in area, but tiny Hong Kong maybe. It is of great importance, I dare say, to the rest of the world. Because Hong Kong used to be, and still is, the plank through which a lot of overseas investors would go into China. And likewise, a lot of people in China would come to Hong Kong as a plank to go overseas and so on. That's been Hong Kong's role all these years, all these hundreds of years. Now, and Hong Kong is what it is today, meaning a special administrative region of China, because of that agreement, the Sino-British Joint Declaration. Now, therefore, the rest of the world should look at the way China is implementing her own agreement with the British government and see whether those promises contained in that joint declaration are implemented and are honored by China. Because if the rest of the world see that it is not being honored and say nothing, you are really giving encouragement to China to break other international agreements. And so that cannot be proper. That cannot be right. In the words of Xi Jinping when he was in Paris just a few days ago, the lion has awakened. The lion says, don't worry, I'm a peaceful, loving lion. But it's time to remind our good leader, Greg, we'd like to see you remaining peaceful and loving. But if you would also honor your international agreements, start with the one on Hong Kong. You promise all these things to the Hong Kong people. We would believe that you are a loving lion if you show your love to your little pup, to your little cub. Because in that context, Hong Kong becomes important. Because Hong Kong is what it is today because of this agreement.
I'll take your two questions. I agree we need to do more to improve communication between Hong Kong people and the mainland. But the hostility and the feeling of discrimination actually is on both sides. I'll give you one very simple example. These days, if you go into a Hong Kong shop selling name brands, Hong Kong people feel discriminated against because the first persons to be served are those who speak Putonghua, because the shop attendants know they have deep pockets and they will buy up everything inside. So if you are a Cantonese speaker, please step to one side and we'll serve you by and by. Secondly, yes, we are aware there is competition from Shenzhen, from Shanghai. But Hong Kong has always known that competition is actually good for us because it keeps us on our toes. And we don't underestimate the competition that we face from big cities and from medium-sized cities in the mainland. But in my view, for any province or any city to aspire to be a truly regional financial center, yes, you have plenty of hardware, but you need the software. And what are the software? You need a certain business environment. You need an independent judiciary so that business people know if they run into disputes, their disputes will be settled fairly in an open court. You need free flow of information. In other words, all the core values that we have in Hong Kong and which are enshrined in the basic law. These are Hong Kong's strengths. And if we want to remain ahead of the curve and remain the preeminent financial center for China, then we need to preserve these strengths and to impress upon mainland China that it's not just in Hong Kong's interest that you allow two systems to be faithfully implemented, but it's as much in the interest of China. Why does China use Hong Kong as its main offshore renminbi center? For precisely the reasons that I set out for you just now. So what is good for Hong Kong is good for our country as a whole. I mean, Martin and I are both Chinese. We're very proud of the achievements of leaders in the 4 decades of phenomenal economic growth since Deng Xiaoping embarked on the open door policy. We want to see a strong China. But I want to see, and I'm sure Martin wants to see, a China that is strong, not just economically, but a China that has increasing confidence in dealing with its own people on universal values. A China that will embrace universal values, that to me is a definition of a truly strong country. And I have no doubt China wishes to be taken seriously as a member of the international community.
If Shanghai were to overtake Hong Kong as a financial international center of China or of Southeast Asia, but keeping and acquiring all the core values that we had, because now our core values have come down, then it will be extremely good for Shanghai and for China. But if Hong Kong were to lose our core values because of the deliberate attempt on the part of Chinese leadership to remove our core values, to make it easier for them to govern Hong Kong, then if on those terms Shanghai were to overtake us, it doesn't really do Shanghai any good, or China any good. So I don't mind if they overtake us. But I do mind, I do insist that we keep our core values so that we will be competitive. And if Shanghai beats us, fine.
Thank you both very much. I think, unfortunately, we don't have time for more publicly asked questions. I believe that our guests will be around for a few minutes afterwards if you want to say hello. And so that was really very much in the nature of wrap-up remarks. Martin, is there any last comment you'd like to make before we let our audience go?
Well, Hong Kong has always got the support of our friends in this country. And on Capitol
America, okay?
Capitol Hill, Hong Kong has always have had partisan support. And I hope this will continue. And I have no doubt this will continue. Because the values that we stand for are what you stand for. So if Hong Kong can be maintained as what Deng Xiaoping wanted it to continue to have, and what you would like Hong Kong to continue to be, then it can only be good for Hong Kong, but even better for China. And my vision is that China will continue to grow so that one day all the 1.3 billion people in China, maybe more by that time, will have their rights respected and guaranteed by an elected leadership.
These are very, very wonderful visions to hear you articulate so clearly. I think you've brought everyone over on your side, and we all want to thank you very much for coming to this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's a very interesting discussion they made, right? And a little bit long, but understandable, right? Okay, I want to continue the next one after lunch.
Okay.
One more is the new representative of Hong Kong, right? Carrie Lam. She's the head of Hong Kong now. She's the last one? Oh, she's Carrie Lam. Oh, she's the last one. Okay, this is the last one, last video. Just 20 minutes.
Never have I ever broken a bone.
Yeah, 20 minutes, okay. After lunch, I'll coming back again. Okay? So we're going to start 1:15, okay? Okay? Okay. Okay, we'll continue next video is Carrie Lam。彼女はですね、今回当選した、あれですね、行政長官、ね。で、結構ちゃんとした人で、まあ、いろいろこう、香港の、もともと民放の出身だけど、いろいろこう、香港でいろいろ役職を経てきて、チャンさんよりも10歳若いのかな、もっと若い。こういうふうな経歴を持って。で、なんか居住、狭いアパートの、なんか違法アパートでなんとかそういうふうなのを改善したりして、それなりの成果を上げてきた。で、2017年に、4月に行政長官に任命されたと。で、まとめは、香港って都市部がわずか 23% しかないんだそうです。そこに700万人が住んでいる。46% は公園だそうです。まあ、彼女はまあ、これ、本人の性格をよく表している。 extraneous 本質的でない extraneous epidemic interact lesson indices predominantly sociology wetland Cox statutory landfill affluence arouse segregate monopolistic decay shark handsome frank degradation congested dilapidated hygiene ハイジーンがよく出ますね。conservation, backdrop, greet. Okay, so じゃあ、carry on. Let's have a look.
To all of you who have come to this Urban Age conference hosted by the London School of Economics Cities Program and the University of Hong Kong. It really gives me great pleasure to be able to speak to you this morning. Unfortunately, I'm not able to stay for the debate. I understand that the Urban Age conference essence lies in the debate and the exchange of views or a bit of argument. But because I need to go back for a very important meeting with all my other principal officials, and indeed I'm flying out in the afternoon to Shanghai, to another wonderful city. So program is a bit tight, but I hope that LSE Cities will bring this conference back to Hong Kong. Hope that LSE Cities will bring this conference back to Hong Kong in future. Where is my remote? Is this the remote? As John said, I was given this topic to talk about responding to global challenges. I have to say that I'm not entirely sure that I can really give you a very credible presentation based on my limited experience. But what I will do in the next 20 or so minutes, and perhaps we have a bit of time for a few Q&As, is to share with you Hong Kong's experience and Hong Kong's experiment, especially in the last 4.5 years in my position as Hong Kong's Secretary for Development. I have this privilege of taking forward this piece of work, which is very close to the Urban Age program, which is the physical and the social. Because I'm sure John knows about it, I was Hong Kong's Director of Social Welfare for 3 years in a very difficult period, 2000-2003, when we were still suffering from the Asian financial crisis and the SARS epidemic. So I think I understand how important it is to take care of the social, human aspects in any form of city planning. Now, first of all, I have picked this up from the LSE's booklet, which talk about this whole venture. The LSE Cities investigates how complex urban systems are responding to the pressures of growth, change, and globalization with new infrastructures of design and governance that both complement and threaten social and environmental equity. Those are a lot of words there, and each word is very significant. And I think Hong Kong stands up very well in terms of that complexity, the complex urban system where a lot of things are interacting and happening. I will not have the time as well as the insight to talk about governance today, though I would say that governance is becoming more and more important. So make sure that whatever we have in mind is able to be delivered. Now, just a bit of background, especially for those coming from overseas, when I mentioned this complex urban systems in Hong Kong, which we have to manage and respond to all those pressures and changes over the years. First is, of course, population growth. Hong Kong's population increased by 1 million per decade since the 1950s. But into the year 2000, our projections are such that this sort of population growth will somewhat moderate. And we want to take advantage of this sort of lessened population growth pressure to be able to do other things in order to respond to the global challenge. Because the pressure of population growth is such that many cities do not have many options in hand, because you need to deal with very livelihood issues as a result of the population growth. Now, what is Hong Kong today? We are a very modern and dense city of 7 million people. From these few indices that I have picked, you'll see that, I hope you will agree, that this is a very successful city economically. We now predominantly service economy. GDP per capita is good. And with a small place like this, without much natural resources, we are now the world's #1 in terms of our aviation business, cargo business. Although the container business has come down a bit, we are still #3 in the world. Since this is a gathering of city planners, sociologists, and urban people, the first thing we need to know about Hong Kong is how we have responded to that population growth, that economic needs in terms of land utilization. This chart has now been used umpteen times in my presentation, but for those who are first comers to Hong Kong, you'll still be amazed by the fact that of the 1,100 square kilometers of land that we have only actually developed less than 1/4. So the built-up area accounted for only 23.7%. And the rest are really preserved country parks, accounting for about 46%, and wetlands and some agricultural land and so on. And what is more interesting is if you look in detail into the 23% and try to break it down, all sorts of housing, public, private, HOS, village housing, take up only 7% of the land. So 7 million people crammed into 7% of the land is quite remarkable in terms of intensity. And the city is still working and moving with that sort of intensity. How have we been able to cope with vertical densities? We have chosen to go high in order to meet that sort of population needs. So vertical densities, I think, have been meeting Hong Kong's needs over the last few decades, to the extent that the number of skyscrapers now have surpassed New York City. That's why on one occasion with some New Yorkers, I was joking that if there's going to be a skyscraper museum, and there's indeed one in New York City, it should be relocated to Hong Kong. Just to show you some wonderful pictures about the countryside, which has been preserved as a result of that model of land use adopted in Hong Kong. Nowadays, 46% of our land are country parks, protected by law. So it's not just an administrative measure, it's protected by law together with the special areas. They are put under statutory control, and any attempt to take any small piece of land from the country parks will meet with very strong opposition. We have already seen this yesterday. You switch on the TV news yesterday, you will have this scene of people putting up banners and objecting to the town planning board's discussion on trying to take a very small piece. What is that, Jimmy? 5%. 5 hectares. 5 hectares of land from a country park in order to expand a landfill to look after Hong Kong's municipal waste problem. And that has met with strong opposition. The Town Planning Board has yet to deal with it later this month. So this is the sort of difficulties that we are facing in terms of land use. It's all very well to preserve a land, but once preserved, you have little hope to try to take them away. Now, apart from going up, of course, any city needs other measures to support that sort of intensity and still keep the city moving and generally a livable city. So I just want to talk about transport. Although transport does not fall within my policy portfolio, we have another secretary called the Secretary for Transport and Housing. But the control over cars, over automobiles in Hong Kong is the envy of many places. So we managed to control cars in Hong Kong, of course, by investing very heavily in the public transport system, especially mass transit. So these two indicators compare for you the length of public roads that we have built per 1,000 population in Hong Kong as compared with other cities of equal economic affluence, and also the private car ownership in Hong Kong. So you see the green bars, they are significantly lower than most of the cities, including Singapore, which have a similar size, in fact smaller than ourselves and so on. And at the moment, some 90% of the average daily trips by Hong Kong people are looked after by public transport. So it is very common that most people do not feel that they need a car in Hong Kong to get around. It is also achieved by good connectivity, especially in some districts like Central. Many people like Central because it's very walkable. All the main buildings are being connected through the pedestrian network. And also we have the escalator which brings people up to the mid-levels. So again, it saves the need for car trips. The way that we plan our buildings also provide a lot of convenience, what we call all the amenities under one roof. So in zoning terms, we have what we call the CDA, the Comprehensive Development Area Zoning, which allows for residential, commercial, and other things to go into the same plot of land. And of course, this is one of the latest in the above the Kowloon Station on the Airport Railway, with the elements, with the car parks, cinemas, and everything put together. And in the more intangible terms, Hong Kong has always been branded as a place where the East meets the West. So the cultural diversity is something that makes the city quite attractive. So far so good. This is Hong Kong's unique cityscape. But this Hong Kong experience may not be totally pleasant. So in the next few slides, I'm going to show you some of the problems that have caught people's attention and have aroused quite considerable public concern, particularly in recent years. First is this concern and complaint about segregated neighborhoods, very boring and monopolistic shopping centers, and of course, as years pass by, urban decay. One of the pictures you see here with the title called Town of Sadness Pleads for Help refers to a new town in the northwestern part of New Territories called Tin Shui Wai, which has been branded as a city of sadness because there was a high concentration of public rental housing, a high concentration of low-income households, and a lack of jobs. In the northern part of this new town, the public housing component is as high as close to 90%. And this is, I think, one of the main problems which lead to segregated neighborhoods. And you have seen elements with this all wonderful convenience all under one roof, but the outcome will be this sort of wall-like buildings, which I put it under the overwhelming power of economic pressure. I'm not shirking responsibility. The government has some responsibility to it because those are airport rail sites, and also the government manages to collect handsome premium from this sort of high-density developments. We do not like to see some of the high buildings out of context. These are only two examples. So because of the economic pressures, sometimes the planning control is not able to catch up with the actual situation. And we're also seeing urban heat island. You can see on this urban climatic map, the urban areas are several degrees higher than the countryside in Hong Kong. Environmental degradation in terms of growing carbon emissions, which have increased by 20% in the last 10 years. And I would draw your attention to this analysis. Power generation accounts for 67% of Hong Kong's greenhouse gas emissions, and buildings account for some 90% of the electricity consumption in Hong Kong. So it means that buildings alone, we have about 42,000 buildings in Hong Kong, they account for 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions, which of course any person with common sense will agree with me. Then you should tackle the buildings if you want to do something about the greenhouse gas emissions, which there will be an example I'll show you later on. On the roadside, situation is not good as well. These are the roadside pollution indexes captured by the Environmental Protection Department. Very often on most of the days in congested areas in Central Causeway Bay, you are seeing this high, or very high indexes. These are the social aspects of the city development, social disintegration. We have done quite a number of urban redevelopment projects with a very good objective in mind. We want to help people to take them out of very dilapidated living conditions in their old buildings, sometimes without lifts, without the hygiene facilities. But there are people who felt that by doing that, perhaps not have done it in a proper way, we might have unintentionally undermined the neighborhood, the social network built up over years in a particular area. So these are some of the protest actions that we have seen in recent years. And the increasing disparity between the rich and poor, as measured by the Gini coefficient. So, so much for the experience of Hong Kong, the good side, the not so pleasant side of our development. At the beginning of this term, the chief executive has said in his policy address, in fact, to follow up on his election manifesto, where he said that we should go for more balanced development, because back in 2006-07, it was the time when we were seeing all these protests, whether on the heritage development side or on the city development side. So the chief executive has given this mandate for his team to take through. He wants us to press ahead with what he called progressive development, which means that overall progress rather than economic development is more important. So it's not just chasing after GDP growth or affluence. Apart from the economic benefits, he said that we should strive for benefits to culture, the society and the environment, which means that we have to go for sustainable, balanced, and diversified development. So with that sort of backdrop, in the last 4.5 years, I'm trying to put it in practice. I'm a very pragmatic official, so I want to practice what progressive development means and how we are going to reflect it in our policies. This little table or grid, whichever way you call it, is drawn up for the first time. So David Leung Yu came for this. Professor Leung is a very good friend. We work very closely, and he must have gone to umpteen of my presentations in the last few years. But every time he still came and wants something new. So I gave you this slide. This is a new slide you have not seen. This is trying to capture in a more systematic way the things that I've been doing or experimenting in the last 4.5 years. My portfolio, broadly speaking, cover planning, building, land, and heritage. Infrastructure is relatively straightforward. I actually put very little attention to the infrastructure, partly because of my own social background and partly because I have every trust in my engineers. They will be able to deliver the infrastructure program with my little support. So in each of this area, there are 3 guiding principles to the work I do and to the practices or the policies that I try to test out. They are sustainability, livability, and humanity. Okay. So I try to slot in the things that I have done over these 4.5 years into these boxes. And I can take you through each one of those, but we don't have a time. So I have highlighted 4 areas, 4 boxes, which I'll briefly explain to you how the elements have been reflected in the policy. So in terms of building sustainability, I'm going to show you the initiatives and the policy we have rolled out to improve the quality built environment in Hong Kong.
Okay, just finished, but okay, we cannot make judgment who she is, but she has very good government official, right? Okay, this is final, video of Hong Kong. So I just, yes?
I didn't know so well while I'm
Oh, she is good. She is good, huh?
yeah, and also it's social program, which is the boy disparity for.
Yeah, she is a development director, and just he explained that, and her history like this.
So does Singapore have a similar problem in living condition, and social problem, and gap between rich and poor?
Singapore social problem? What do you mean?
Does Singapore face a similar problem as Hong Kong is?
No, I don't think so. Singapore is, compared with Hong Kong, their population is actually the same as Hong Kong, 7 million. But original Singaporean is, I think, less than 4 million. Those people, not so much disparity. I don't think so. 3 million people from overseas. But those people, almost people are very skilled people. They're just selected people. Singapore government, just control for those people get into Singapore. Hong Kong is different. Hong Kong is Hong Kongese is mainly from mainland China. And Hong Kong is originally they have very poor people in the Hong Kong Central. So this kind of problem Hong Kong has, but Singapore maybe they don't have it. Do they? No, I don't think so. Singapore is more fringe benefit is better than Hong Kong. They try to manage the people, the health care and education and training and everything else rather than Hong Kong. Right? Hong Kong is real democratic country, but Singapore is different. It's Lee Kuan Yew's authoritarian government before. So they manage the country very well compared with Hong Kong. So I think also no discrimination, and also that country is egalitarian, equal. Hong Kong is different. Really pure democratic country before, right? Or now. Okay, let's get into the final. This one is I prepared discussion. This is not only the Hong Kong, but to all of the North Asia and Southeast Asia. What this means? Do you think that the experience in occupied Japan proves that the U.S. Constitution can be transplanted to any other land? Why or why not? Oh, U.S. Constitution can transplant to any other country?
Or U.S. Constitution or U.S. social system based on.
Oh, yeah. Can they, or why not? And based on Japanese experience?
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, pros and there must be pros and cons. The good aspect, the bad aspect, it depends on, I think, the history of each countries and some environment surrounded by neighboring countries and some economic position.
Okay, one example yesterday. I just Tokyo Industrial University's honorable professor mentioned that about these issues. Okay, for example, Japanese constitution, we can bring to those constitution or Japanese culture to overseas. Everybody said no. Because Japanese environment is very rare to be lied or teased or kind of, manipulated. They are Japanese people very honest. So very difficult to transplant to the other countries, Japanese culture, Japanese system, Japanese experience. He said, America is the same. American culture is different from the rest of the world. It's not easy, it is impossible to bring their constitution to all over the world. So they follow on their culture. Okay? This is democracy. Democracy is different by country. That's the reason why. Okay? Second question, what do you think are 3 factors that most determine what a democracy is? 3 factors. 3 factors is executive and legislation and rule of law. Right?
3 factors. Executive is the president office. That's the most determined what? Rule of law.
Oh? But different? What do you think are 3 factors that most determine what democracy is? Oh, for the people, by the people, to the people. 3 factors. Okay. Different, sorry. Okay. Number 3. Do you think Indonesia... Okay, we have to make discussion, but I don't do that. Do you think Indonesia's President Joko Widodo is leading them toward the true democracy? Maybe. Can India really be called a democracy if it's still seeing 30% poverty rate and illiteracy rate still at 25% as of 2011?
I don't know.
Yes. India is democracy.
India is some sort of democracy, but I'm not sure it can be said it's true democracy.
What's wrong for them?
I don't know, by the people for them.
What's wrong for them? Tell me something.
Yeah, they have social intangible social layers where something is still being...
Oh, you mean the caste system? They are abolished?
Yeah, abolished. But I have some, as we can see, some news that something unequal is still going on.
Okay, true meaning is okay. The answer is this. They have 7 states. Okay, 7 states. They do not communicate each other. 7 states independent. This is an obstacle to attain the true democracy. No communication, language different. So that's the reason why Modi tried to change labor law. He cannot change it because of 7 states is different system. Okay? I think this is major reason.
Yeah. How is the possibility in nature? Nature, they practice
what?
To do something with the democracy is
what would you say?
Indonesia.
Huh?
Indonesia?
You said
the Jacobi can lead the country toward democracy.
I just noises called me. Say again?
If Jacobi
Indonesia
can lead the country towards the democracy. The democracy is a democracy in nature.
Yeah, democracy is Indonesia. Yeah, they are. They didn't, but now is their democracy. Right? Joko Widodo is the Indonesian democracy. No? What's wrong? Okay, next is with the case of Singapore being a satisfactory government without a Western-styled democracy and the US failing to preserve true democratic government. Do you think more of the world country would be better without Western democracy as its goal? What means the US failing to preserve a true democratic government? Do you think more of world country would do better without Western democracy as its goal? Okay, just like Singapore or China, Vietnam is not democratic country, but they're doing well. Right? Okay, next one. Between China's business-related intervention versus America democratic intervention, which is more successful based on past attempts? Of course, China. Democracy is not easy to implement. Good example is Africa.
Yeah, Japan is one of the good examples of American democratic.
Oh, in Japan is good example? Because Japan is just, those people are type of follower. Whoever talking them, they will follow. But none of country like that. Only Japan. It's old people. Very old people. Old. Right?
So it's just the democratic the system and how this system has been how the system is adopted. It is only limited in US and EU.
Oh, because Japan is sincerity, honest, and followership, not against anybody, so they listen. Okay, next. Oh, that's finished. Okay, this is I think already a couple months is spent for this material. Then I just this is the second book of democracy. right? And this is why I wrote this book, is basically, just a moment, I try to read this one. Oh, second book, this is IT Revolution, focus on IT Revolution. Do you remember, this one is North Asia and Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, so China, Vietnam, not Vietnam, or Vietnam, Philippines, IT Revolution. And last paragraph I said, most important is civic people. Are they satisfied? Are they happy? So IT revolution will change that society. More? Oh, more. Okay, this is a very similar content compared with former book. Okay? So, finish, no? Okay. Finish. Okay? So, Hong Kong, finish. And Southeast Asia, North Asia and South Asia. Finish. Also, we need to save. Now, I'd like to move into the Africa. Africa. No, this is, no, Latin America. Latin America is, oh my God, very difficult, very not easy. Africa here. Do you remember last time, I tried to just listen. Okay, this afternoon we're going to start Chinese in Africa, and I will continue from the last week's session. And today is the start from 44. Okay, the stream, how China is changing Africa, is 2015. On the stream, how China is fueling economic growth in African nations. And thumbnail, Senegalese and Chinese construction workers cheered during a ceremony at the construction site of Senegal National Theatre on February 14th, 2009. The building project was financed by China. ということで、2025年までに1兆ドルの資金、これセネガルだね。ケニア、ルワンダね。で、港道路、鉄道、石油パイプライン、水資源。これ結構やばいんですよね。2014年には東アフリカの 30% のインフラ開発は中国が関与している。で中国、EU、アメリカに割りか、中国っていうのはね、インフラ投資を支援してるんですけど、彼らの国家財政とか、健全性とかっていうのはあまり関心持ってないんだよね。ビジネスライクにやってんだよね。だからやばいんだよね。国自身がね。賃金安いという不満もあるけど、賃金安いとこれアフリカ人に対するね。これ、shit. 家賃が安いという不満もあるけど、中国が来なければこれ生まれないっていう、ね。で、アフリカにも求めてるのは製造業なんですよ。製造業ね。
製造
業。要するに、工場ね。工場誘致したい。
工場を誘致するためにはこういうインフラが必要になりますよね。
インフラっていうよりもスキル持った労働者がいないんだよね。中国の8000万の非熟練労働市場のうち 10% だけでもアフリカに来れば今の製造業の労働市場が2倍になるってこと。そういうことだね。エチオピアは南アフリカ過去15年間で中国で安いし。これあと一つは 中国が安い製品を輸出してるんだよね。それで、逆にアフリカが産業なくなっちゃったっていうのもあるんだよね。あとアメリカが米をどこの国だか輸出してて、そこの米市場が崩壊しちゃったっていう話もあるんだよね。補助金でアメリカなんか出してるからね。だから、中国もそうだけど、アフリカなんかに輸出されると、アフリカの製造業やっていけない。中国のスキルを伝承できるようなやり方がいいって書いてね。で中国人できるだけ採用しないようにして現地にもともとね、中国人って来ないんですよ。で、なぜ来ないかというと、航空人代とかね、彼らが現地に滞在する生活環境とかね、いや、アフリカの人よりレベル高いもんだから、コストが採算合わないよね。ボツワナのケースはなんか中断したことがあるってね。それから、中国人をアクセスだけで営業するっていう中国人もいる。まあ日本人もそうだよね。文化的な誤解なんていっぱいあるわね。で、中国は実際にはスキルトランスファー、知識の共有、支援、トレーニングを心得てる。アフリカは何人いたっけ ?100 万人いたかな ?100 万人いるんだよね。日本も体系的にこういう支援をすりゃいいんでね、安倍さんみたいに金をポンと投げるんじゃなくてね。OK。マーベリック。一匹狼ね。ガーナ。The concern cut across ethnic line. できるだけ例文をね、最近はね、文章でね、覚えるようにっていうんで入れてるんですね。これまだ始まったばっかだから。最近は文章やった方がいいですよ。単語だけでなかなか覚えない。conceive, interaction, fleece, ガムート。これガムートかな。ガムートだね。知らないね。ガーテッド。これも知らないね。ガーテッド。デセプティブ。これはスタント。アーティザン。インディカティブ。ベネボレント。アドベント。フェイスパーム。face palm. The story intrigued her. Shorty work. Shunt. Tumultuous. これもよく出ますね。Tumultuous. Okay. So, just I started somewhere. Yeah. Okay, just,なんか同じのばっかりね。なんだこれ。Okay, this one, right? 40 minutes.
So our international online community are very into this topic. From all over the world, they have lots of things to say.
Okay, let me try to come for the title. Stream How China is Changing Africa. And 2015 August. Okay, 40 minutes long.
What do you have, Malika?
Right, so they are tweeting us from different countries on the African continent, and it's interesting hearing their different perspectives. Some of them look like this. This is out of Malawi. This is Sindhu, who's tweeting to the stream, answering the question, what does the relationship of China with your country mean? Sindhu says, it means exploitation of our precious minerals, joblessness of our people, loss of land, and the slaughter of our prized wildlife. On the other hand, out of Ethiopia, you get this comment from Haile Mikhail, who says, China means everything here. They're changing history of economic cooperation, loans, trade, tech, know-how, etc. So we know you have something to say on this topic, and you can share your thoughts with us with hashtag AJStream.
嗨，大家好，我是陈君，我在 The Stream。China has been a major force in building economic growth for many African nations. The Asian superpower is the continent's largest trading partner and has been boosting its investments in exchange for natural resources. China aims to provide $1 trillion in financing to Africa by 2025, much of it for infrastructure projects like roads and railways and airports. But as business ties deepen, who benefits from the China-Africa relationship? With us to talk more about this in Accra, Ghana, Buddy Buruku is an entrepreneur and co-founder of Cuckoo Quality, a poultry farm in Uganda.
Okay, I remember. Africa is a problem for they are English speaking very poor, and also they are very poor for network, so very difficult to listen.
But he's also a country program manager for the African Center for Economic Transformation. In Nairobi, Kenya, Jinhao Lu is a project manager with the Sino-Africa Center for Excellence Foundation. In Johannesburg, South Africa, Richard Poplak, a correspondent for South Africa's Daily Maverick news website, is also working on a new book about China-Africa relations. And in Accra, Ghana, Samlala Ba, an entrepreneur and founder of the sanitation startup company Lu Works. Good to have you here, everybody. Buddy, when you went shopping for equipment for your business, where did you go?
Well, I had to do a lot of research first to find out where would be the best place to go. Some people may not know this, but in China, a lot of industries are concentrated around certain cities, provinces. So I actually ended up in Nanjing, which is sort of my first venture into China anyway, so it's like a homecoming for me.
Right.
Most of the poultry farms and the equipment is based in Nanjing, so my partner and I went there.
All right, and you got the best deal. You looked around the world and you felt, okay, this is the best deal, this is a good fit for me.
Well, I mean, I had to consider a number of things. I'm not a poultry expert by training, so I had to think about sort of balancing between having the right amount of technology and making use of, a good, strong agricultural labor force in my country. So I looked around, I compared countries, and ultimately I went with the Chinese. As you know, everything is made in China, so you can get various levels of quality there as well.
So have a look here on my laptop. I was looking, Richard, at your Twitter feed today, and I found a retweet here from Ray Hartley. It says here, China in Africa, it's complicated. So, Richard, to give us a sense of the kinds of businesses, the kind of investment that's coming into China, I know it's complicated. We look to see around Africa who doesn't have a relationship with China, and there are only one or two countries, if that don't have some kind of ties with China. Can you give us a sense of the kind of business that's being done?
The business, I mean, it cuts across all sectors and all walks of life. The way I like to explain it to people, I think, is you have to look at it from the sort of business to business level, where you have this very well conceived interaction between the 1.4 billion people in China and the 1.1 billion people in Africa, and all of this was kind of designed at a government to government level. There's a multilateral organization called the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, and that was set up by the Chinese in 1999 and 2000. To really engage with all of the countries in Africa. Then you have the small traders, people who come by themselves to come and work in Africa, or to go over to China to make purchases, like we just heard. And then you have the gangsters who come to fleece the joint. So there's just a little bit of everything. It's this really, really rich interaction and this massive epochal encounter that really is changing both entities, I think.
Sure. It really sounds like what you're saying is that it runs the gamut, and that's what we're hearing from our community online also. So this example out of Nigeria, Ade says, lots of Chinese-owned companies provide thousands of employment opportunities, but most of that employment is low-wage jobs. On the other hand, hearing out from someone out of Kenya, this is Kevin, who says, new rail project aided by the Chinese and Kenyan government. It's estimated to cut travel time by half. You can see a picture there. He goes on to show another example, saying They've helped us leap forward in infrastructure, especially here in Kenya. 10 years ago, we didn't have flyovers. You can see the highways there. So, Jinghao, you are in Nairobi. What's the scale of the projects that you are seeing in Kenya?
Yeah, definitely. In these several years, China got some of the largest projects that East Africa communities together are trying to link the whole regions with each other. So from Lamu Port to Nairobi to Mombasa to Dar es Salaam all the way to Kigali in Rwanda, we're seeing that China's involvement across various regions, sectors from port to road to oil pipeline and water system and so on. So the involvement is really large in scale. The recent report by Deloitte pointed out that in East Africa, 30% of the infrastructure projects were addressed by Chinese companies in 2014, as compared to only less than 20% by EU and US.
So I'm just looking at Samlara's face. Samlara, you're looking a little cynical as we're talking about China right now. Am I reading your face correctly?
Not entirely. I think
Okay.
I'd agree with Richard and say that it's complicated. I certainly agree that there are pros and cons regarding investment into any developing nation. And with regard to Chinese investment, yes, we've seen great opportunities with regard to infrastructure. And as the tweet said, I think it was Ade, it's true. There are loads of jobs created. However, they do tend to be the lowest wage jobs, and they don't tend to allow much room for elevation.
Samlara, but would these jobs exist without this investment, this exchange, this trade? Would people be unemployed instead?
That's a touchy subject because it's possible, yes, that they could be unemployed, but anyone could argue that. However, investment in allowing, some would say, allowing local producers or pushing for some type of fairness with regard to labor practices might also help your citizens.
All right.
If I could just jump in here.
Yeah, please, buddy, go ahead.
I mean, the Chinese have been in Africa for many, many decades, but what you don't see is the growth of Chinese-based companies that have grown with the economies, that have grown in size in terms of their engagement with local populations, in terms of their technology transfer and skills transfer. There's been enough time in this relationship between African countries and China for that to happen, if that was the intention of most Chinese companies on the continent. What we are seeing, as was discussed, is this huge infrastructure boom, which is absolutely necessary. The West is not capable, nor does it have the appetite to step in to address the infrastructure deficit on the continent. And we are very grateful for that. But there are several other industries, manufacturing, for example, which has the greatest contribution towards employment generation. That is where we'd really like to see more Chinese engagement.
Jinghao, how would you respond to... Go ahead, Richard, then I'll bring Jinghao in. Richard.
I think this is exactly where we need to start drilling down to the specifics. I think there are African countries that have done very well to start capturing the manufacturing jobs. But that really needs to happen at the African labor law level. It really needs to happen at the African level. An example of a country that's done an excellent job of capturing a lot of the manufacturing jobs that are leaving the Chinese mainland. And here's a little fact just to keep in mind. There have been, over the course of the Industrial Revolution, there have been 10 million manufacturing jobs on the African continent. If we were to capture, as a continent, the roughly 80 million jobs that are leaving the Chinese mainland, the 80 million low-skilled manufacturing jobs, if we were to capture 10% of that, we would, in a decade, double the amount of manufacturing jobs on this continent. Now that's a terrifying statistic, and it shows you what a poor job African countries actually have done at building their manufacturing sectors. So like I was saying, Ethiopia is an example of a country that's done a fantastic job. South Africa is an example of a country that's done a very poor job. Our manufacturing sector has been completely gutted. Yes, it is largely because of the big geopolitical factors, but I think a lot of the responsibility has to lie with African governments.
Richard, for those of us who don't know South Africa well, how's your manufacturing industry been totally gutted? Want to explain a little
It
further?
has over the last 15 years, and again, I'm going to say it's complicated, and not to drill down into too many of the sort of nuts and bolts, but yes, there's pressure from low-cost Chinese goods. I mean, that's happened all over the world, but our labor laws are restrictive here, and for a lot of good reasons. But again, you look to Ethiopia, which has been very, very aggressive in setting up the kind of conditions where the manufacturing sector can boom. And again, you as a country, you have to ask: do you want these low-skilled jobs? Do you want these poorly paid jobs? All of these are very, very difficult questions to ask, but they need to be asked.
Well, so Laura, there's something here I want to direct to you online, because this is something that so many people are telling us. This is a tweet out of Malawi. This is Joy, who says, the Chinese have good infrastructure improvement projects, but local participation has to improve, and locals often are being sidelined. That's echoed here. This is a tweet from Nigeria. Jeff says, any investment that's not geared towards growing local content, adding value to the country, is deceptive investment. So strong words there, Samlara, but you as an entrepreneur, do you find that to be true, that there's not enough local investment?
I certainly agree. I mean, to a certain degree, especially if we're talking regarding that tweet, if we're saying that, let's use the bottom of the pyramid, for example. If we're saying that a lot of these workers are coming from the bottom of the pyramid, are we elevating them at all? Are we working to create jobs that are going to allow them more resources, more opportunities? Or are we going to ensure that they're staying exactly where they are? And I do feel, from my perspective, within sanitation, as we look ahead at growing within manufacturing specifically, I currently consult with Biofuel, and we're fearful with regard to opening a factory or even growing that manufacturing leg out right now, simply because though the Chinese investment has taken manufacturing to new heights on the continent and within country, it's also stunted the growth of some local manufacturers, as Richard said. And we've noticed in our industry in particular that we're hesitant to create factories, and instead we'd like to create multiple artisans that can work together to create our finished products, simply because we're then able to spread out profit and a sense of ownership among our local talent. And I think we're stunting our growth to a certain level when we say that, oh, all these jobs have been created, but what happens to the citizenry afterwards? Are we looking long term?
Junhao, how do you address these very real concerns of local communities about what investment from China may do?
Right. So I think while the media is capturing a lot about these big projects, infrastructure projects employing thousands of people who are not necessarily the highest paid workers, we need to, there are 2 points I really want to address first, to lay out my opinions in the future. Is one, that we need to see that there are trends of more Chinese companies coming to Africa and need to build their own brand. So if you're looking for Chinese equipment companies and the Chinese IT companies like Huawei, these companies are truly interested in localize their business, and they want their brand to be known as an international brand rather than Chinese brand. So in these companies, you will clearly see the trend that, one, they're trying to replace as many local workers and managers, replace as many Chinese managers into locals, and second, that they're setting up a lot of training schools and technical colleges aiming at as a CSR, but more like laying for the future, for the transformation of the company into a more localized one. So I'm seeing more and more these examples in Nairobi, where Chinese companies are refusing to call themselves Chinese, where they want to be local. The other part I want to point out is that even for these largest infrastructure companies that I'm seeing across the continent, at least in 3 countries I traveled to, I realized that they are not interested in really bringing a lot of Chinese people to work on the projects unless there's a strict deadline they have to meet, or the work associated is with certain criteria that they feel only the engineers from China can meet. But if they can address the projects in local content, they would rather do it, because we have done research recently at the SACE Foundation that we found out Chinese company usually pay 6 times more in bringing a Chinese skilled worker in the continent than hiring one locally. then we need to ask ourselves why they're not actually practicing that enough. Is that a cultural reason for not being able to communicate well between the managers or headquarters and the local managers?
Why do you think that is? You've been doing this quite a lot between working with Chinese investors and different countries around the African continent. Why do you think that is? Is it a cultural issue? Is it about not integrating enough, being a little worried about what the local community might be able to do for you as a business? What would you say?
I think it's a great question, and I have been thinking about this.
It was your question.
For a while.
It is a good question.
Yeah. So if we look at the Chinese companies and Chinese managers coming to the African continent, many of them have never been to countries outside of China before, and they came to Africa looking for fortune or earning a good salary. That's why we see a lot of young people managing projects, very significant projects in the continent from China. So a lot of them are still in the beginning stage. Some of them speak good English. Many of them probably speak not very good English, but more importantly, they don't have a very good multicultural understanding. They're not involved in that culture in China. So when it's down to dealing with Africans, a lot of time they're very inward, and they tend to feel more comfortable with themselves. That being said, I think it's slowly changing with more Chinese companies that are trying to push a very big sales team and want Chinese people to be very integrated in the local community. We're going to see a trend of, but it's going to take years for this to happen. But I'm confident that it's the direction that it's going.
Well, picking up on what you said, Jinghao, about being integrated in local communities, we actually got a video comment from Sarah out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I'm going to pose this to you, Richard. Have a listen to this.
There is something to be said about how Chinese companies adapt so quickly. For example, they speak the local language. They are not limited in living in some of the nicest area of the town. They really go out there and live in the communities where they work. And this capacity is really enabling Chinese investments to deliver in places where traditional donors have been struggling for the past 50 years. There is something to be said about how it's so interesting that people are responding more favorably to this direct approach that is less patronizing and more mutually beneficial.
So Richard, in her experience, she's saying this has been beneficial and interesting because it hasn't been done in the past.
Yeah, I think Sarah makes some really interesting points, and I would agree with her in the Democratic Republic of the Congo context. I think Chinese firms working there have done a better job than they have done elsewhere. I've been looking at this phenomenon for the past 6-7 years quite closely. I've been to a number of these big work sites, and I know we're concentrating on that right now, and we perhaps shouldn't be, because the phenomenon is much wider than that. But on these big work sites, these big infrastructure projects, I sat down with a manager of a dam, a Sino hydro project in Botswana. He said when he first got to Africa, he was afraid to shake hands with the locals because he was nervous of catching AIDS. That kind of cultural misunderstanding really was pervasive throughout the entire structures in Sino Hydro in Botswana, and they had a really hard time at integrating within the community, and eventually Sino Hydro was actually kicked out of Botswana. They no longer worked there. That proved to be a disaster for one of China's largest SOEs, and it's indicative of the kind of cultural issues that we've been talking about. These cultural barriers are very real. But Sarah is absolutely correct in saying that many companies have been very swift at sort of evolving and saying, oh, okay, well, we have these cultural constraints. We have to break these barriers down. How do we do better? How do we get better? How do we advance this stuff?
Let me show you some. Yeah, go ahead, buddy.
Sorry if I may. I wanted actually to expound a little bit more in terms of smaller companies doing that. It's true that you will find Chinese entrepreneurs operating in the most obscure, rural, forsaken areas in many African countries. But I don't know to what extent they're doing that in an integrated manner with the actual local communities. How much are they employing outsiders? Because I have been in a situation where I got out off a plane that was coming from Addis, which transiting in Addis, coming from Beijing, and had to help several people go through the immigration process because it was clear to me that they hadn't even reached the high school level but were coming into Ghana in order to have jobs in very hinterland areas, parts of Chinese companies. So I'm curious, since you've been specifically looking at this issue, yes, with the larger companies such as the one that you mentioned, there is almost a political incentive to be more engaged, to be more, to reach out their hand, because that is in part the Chinese government's directive. But for those Chinese who come to Africa without even the knowledge of the Chinese government, which, to be frank, is happening very much so now, are you seeing any evidence of this happening, this like hand-holding, this joint ventureship, this integration? I'm not sure I am. Richard?
No, I would agree with you. I think I would say that from my research and the research of a number of others, when you look at the larger projects, it's roughly one Chinese national to 5 locals. That's pretty much the average. When you start looking at the much smaller companies, I would say that entirely disappears. What you're talking about is companies that, or individuals that are working entirely outside of labor regulations. Small companies that don't pay any tax, that probably aren't registered in many cases. They exist, they function in a gray zone, and that gray zone is outside of any sort of labor norms. And certainly in the South African context, I would say that very small Chinese, what we call here spaza shops, small shops, may hire a local here or there. How much money they actually pump into the economy in terms of employment, I would argue it's negligible.
Let me show you something here on my laptop. It's from a Chinese news website called Dowei News. And here we've got an illustration. So you have Africa here, which says Africa. Then we have fish. This is the fishing rod. And here we have China. And so the inference here in this illustration is that China is bringing both fish and also the fishing rod, so the means and also some aid as well. Jinghao, is that how you see China's relationship with the African continent?
Yeah, so I think just to take from the previous conversations, I think when we talk about China-Africa relationship, we need to be very cautious or be very open to different scenarios. There are kind of top-level government-led government-led cooperation that is always very benevolent and looking for always transferring skills, exchange of knowledge, and aid and training the officials. At the mid-level, we have the state-owned enterprises that are trying to act on behalf of the state will, and also
we're in the closing seconds of this show. So the relationship for you, somebody who's worked really hard to bring China into the African continent, in a sentence, what would it be?
It's a very complicated, and on the higher level, it looks like a mutually beneficial relationship. But on the grassroots level, it's very complicated. We have very smart entrepreneurs who are very localized.
Buddy Baruku, Richard Poplak, and Samlara Bar. We're going to take you to the post show. Thank you for your insights about Africa and China and their business relationship. Thanks for watching. Hello there, welcome back to the Post Show. We're talking about China and also the African continent and investment and trade there. I'm going to actually start with Malika. You had a lot of comments about, what would I say, technology and quality, and goods available.
Exactly, and it's something that, Richard, you'd mentioned a little bit earlier. People are picking up on that. And these are in the view of it being favorable. So Laseni says, with Chinese, 2 out of 3 Africans have a phone. Many have computers and luxury goods. Another person writes in this from Ghana, Kukua, says, there's a huge market for affordable made-in-China electronics in Ghana, and that's something ordinary citizens benefit from. She goes on to say, there are Ghanaian traders who travel to China frequently to bring affordable goods from furniture to phones to our market. So, Buddy, you are in Ghana. Do you see this as favorably as Kukua does?
I have to agree with Kukua that the advent or